Hey, sorry for the wait.
Hey, no problem.
Yeah, I was struggling to record in 4K for some reason.
Okay.
But we got it sorted out.
Nice.
How are you doing?
I'm good. It's early. I'm not a morning person.
Right. So what time is it there now?
It's 7:09 right now, so it's not super early, but it's funny. I was always a night owl, and now I'm not a night owl anymore. But I'm also not a morning person. So,
Right. So you're basically describing the typical creative person limbo of the first 20-something years living as a night owl, and then suddenly, do you have children?
I do.
Okay, so that probably changed things, did it? Or
that did. I tried to hold on to that, the whole staying up late thing, but it just doesn't work out.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. That seems to be the case with creative people. Have you found that most people you, for example, work with say the same thing? Or have you met a creative morning person ever?
I can't say that I have. That's interesting.
Yeah. I'm kind of going through the same thing. Although I will say, like, all in all, it's definitely better for you in general to wake up early and go with the natural cycle of the earth and the day. But I will say, like, if you leave me to my devices and I don't have any responsibilities, I'll start to default back into the night owl stuff.
Right.
But it has to be something to do with creativity, because everybody says the same thing.
Yeah. I will say it is a lot easier, at least, for us this time of year. The sun's out earlier, right? So getting up while the sun is rising makes it a lot easier than getting up early and it's still dark. It's like, that's difficult.
Yeah. Where are you based right now?
In Santa Rosa, California.
Right. So
I know your experience is going to be different. For the whole sun timing thing.
Yeah, and we get, like, I don't know, I don't want to be pessimistic or negative about it, but during the winter we get barely any sun, and then during the summer it doesn't go away at all.
Right.
So, like, the other night it was really hot in because I sleep on the floor next to our son in the same room, and it was really hot in the room, and I was like, I need to open the window, like, get some fresh air. And I opened it, and it was like the lights were on, and I was like, I can't sleep with the lights on. So I had to close it and then open the window in a different room. But the sun never sets, especially this is exactly the time of the year when it's at its highest in relation to the horizon. So no, nightless nights, I guess.
Yeah. So how many kids do you have?
2.
Okay, same here.
So they're okay, nice. Yeah, what age?
My daughter is 14 and my son is 10. Well, he's turning 11 in a month, so
nice.
Yeah. What about yours?
Yeah. They're in August, September, they're going to be 4 and 2. So
okay. Oh, nice.
Kind of a different kind of a thing going. I can't even imagine what it's like to have a 10-year-old. But does it get easier?
Yeah, I guess in some ways, there's definitely milestones, right? So, like, once you can communicate to them and then they learn the word no, right? And then thing changes again, right?
Yeah.
So it's different. I mean, as you know, with parenthood, it's like nothing can prepare you for it. You just have to jump. You just have to dive in, right?
Yeah. The no word is interesting because with our son, I think it took him, like, it was probably past his, like, 2-year-old point when he started to kind of find his own tune, so to speak. But our daughter, she's been already doing that for a couple of months. And she's going to be 2 in September. So I guess she started early with the whole no thing.
Oh, man.
And right now it's, I want to do things myself. And then she says no. So she wants to do everything by herself, which is great. But it's kind of challenging when you don't know how to do just about anything. So but they are so funny. One of the things I wish I knew earlier is how funny kids are and how much fun they are, because they're just so absurd, because their view on life is completely open and new. So they're going to see and say weird stuff all the time. And that's awesome.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a journey for sure. But I think the thing that's been on my mind that I keep reminding myself is, how as you get older, it seems like time passes faster and faster. Like, it's like, oh, wait, it's 2026 already? Like, where is time going, But for kids, it doesn't, right? For them, it's like, just to get through school and make it to the weekend, it's like forever. So I have to remember when I was that age and remember that feeling of time moving so slowly. And I think that's what helps, at least for me, helps me appreciate, the time that I do spend with them, and just kind of being around them and how much they appreciate that. So,
yeah. Now, that's one of the things that I wish I could certainly tell my past self. But so one of the things that I repeatedly tell to creative people is that if you're in your like teenage years or even 20s, still in your 20s, you should know that time is going to start going really fast, like past 30. It's going to be so different. So like work now and, soak everything in and do as much as you can, because like you said, it's the years go by like this. And with kids, the days can be long and you're like, oh my, like, when can I go to bed? But I can't, like, it's weird to me to say that our son is going to be 4 in August. And it's like, what? Already? And it feels like ages ago when he was born, but simultaneously it's gone by so fast. So I already know, like, he's going to be 10 in no time. And it's really partly sort of scary in a sense, like you want to be present and you want to, take it in and not be so occupied with all the mundane day-to-day busyness and stuff like that. So, definitely really weird.
Yeah. You just have to hang on and just enjoy the ride. Like, I mean, I try to take a lot of pictures, because I'm like, I don't want to forget these moments and stuff, even if they're just us hanging out at home. Like, just take, even if they're the worst photos ever, like just being able to scroll back through time and see that. And, I don't know, for me, then that brings back all the memories and makes me remember, oh yeah, we did do a lot of things together during that time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been thinking about this as well a lot, because our kids basically have not their entire life, but when I say their entire life, I mean like a lot of video from a lot of days of them. Like I'm basically like videoing them most of the time when they're doing something funny. So I'm actually running into a bit of a storage issue, because I have terabytes of video and pictures of our kids. So I'm like, where am I going to put all of this? And at some point I want to curate it. I'm actually hoping there's like some kind of AI thing that helps me, get rid of the kind of junk and just keep the like maybe one version of a single event. But yeah, it's getting into a bit of an issue. But it's really interesting, because I don't think, like, these are probably the first times when people can have their entire life sort of documented in this sort of a detail. So if they want, when they're older, they could basically watch their entire life, sort of, not really, but kind of summarized from like 0 to however old they get. At some point, they don't want to be filmed anymore, and I always have respected that, even when they're really, really small. If they say like, no, don't film me, I'm like, cool. But obviously, you love them and you want to store the memories, and you're like, filming whenever you can as what's the word, in a way that doesn't disrupt the situation. But it's going to be interesting, because I would love to go back and watch, myself as a baby and see how I sort of behaved and grew up, because I have no idea like what that was like. Maybe we have some random photos from here and there, but it's actually interesting from like a self-development perspective, because I would love to know what kind of a baby I was. So then I could actually understand if I was like a daring kid, or maybe I was a bit shy, or maybe, I was a certain way, sort of naturally speaking. And then I could look at my behavior and be like, okay, something changed along the way, or something went wrong, or something went right. So I think that is a really big tool to understanding kind of your natural nature or temperament, if you will. So hopefully it's going to be useful to them.
Yeah. And I should say there are moments where I'm like, okay, this is just something I need to be present for, put the phone away and just, recording. I will say it is difficult, with our 14-year-old, she, we'll have to say, this is not going anywhere. We're not posting on social media, not that we really do that a lot anyway, but, just to reassure, we just want to have photos to remember, so there's not like a gap,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't put any of our family life anywhere else. I don't feel like it belongs to anyone else, and I would feel kind of uncomfortable. But they will have this archive for themselves if they want. And I can imagine it gets more difficult as they age, because they're like, maybe dad and mom aren't so cool anymore, and they're like, oh, that makes me awkward, and don't film me. And but yeah, it's like you said, being present is the most important thing, because that's what they are going to remember. Because otherwise they're going to remember me with my phone like this and laughing and looking at the screen instead of looking at them. And they're going to be like, well, that's not very cool, Dad. So I try and I've done less and less of it as they become more conscious and, self-aware. And then I might put the camera on and like put it on the side or something like that. But yeah, that's it. It's very true, because you want to be present for them and for yourself as well. Otherwise, again, like you said, it's going to go by and you're not really there with your kids.
Yeah. I think in theory, I like the idea of Google made a product a while ago that was just a camera that you put in your house, and it would use, AI to detect, notable moments to record for you, and maybe you do a little, moving around, like tracking motion. But it's just the privacy concerns about that is like, I would never go near a product like that. Like,
yeah, suddenly you're gonna have your dick pics out in a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, right.
If they're not there already somewhere. Bad joke.
Yeah.
But that's that. The concept is very cool, because that's exactly what I would like to have. And obviously there are the glasses as well with the camera.
Yeah.
Obviously they are, the Black Mirror episodes on this kind of stuff. It can go wrong really easily, and it can get dark very easily. But the concept of a passive capturing of a nice moment without disrupting the moment is really nice. But like you said, comes with a lot of privacy issues and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, especially I think the Meta glasses nowadays are the thing where, if somebody's wearing those, you're not always aware of if you're being recorded, and where that's going. So there's definitely some concerns. And then, like you said, I mean, if you're just in your house, like, you should be able to just relax and, I don't know.
Yeah.
In some gradient of, wearing clothing, or you could just be in your pajamas or something like that. And, probably not in a form of, ready for consumption for that to be in video or pictures that are just out there.
Yeah. And there is also, like you said, something about knowing that you're just being present here with your family and no one else, and kind of the sanctity of that. It's definitely worth more than any capturing of a moment that you can look at later, because ultimately it's the good memories that you have of being with somebody that is the most important thing. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm not gonna incorporate technology like that at any point. no matter how nice the idea is, to
Well,
some extent.
yeah, I mean, I guess it depends too. If it's just stuff that runs locally, there's all sorts of AI stuff that you just run locally that can do stuff like that. I think that would change things, at least for me, if I know that video is not just going to the cloud and then used as training data and stuff like that. I'd definitely be more welcoming of the idea of using some AI to process it.
Yeah. Yeah, the local stuff definitely is the way to go. But obviously, a lot of stuff can be hacked, but it depends. I mean, I guess you could make it as secure as possible, but I don't know. You probably know more about that than I do, but
it's an ongoing journey. But it's like, so I run Home Assistant at home, just on a little like Intel NUC, and it has just really basic stuff, but it's all local, and so yeah, somebody could hack me. I'm sure they could figure out a way to get in, but they would have to specifically target me. It's not like all my data is part of some larger database that's stored on the cloud somewhere, and that gets hacked, and then suddenly you have, hundreds of thousands of people's information out there. So you do have the benefit if things are local, even if they are open to the web in some capacity, and maybe the security isn't tight enough, then somebody could get in, but it would have to be very direct.
Yeah. Someone with very special interests in your life. I guess there's a saying that some of the like lock pickers and thieves say that basically nothing is secure. It's just about levels of deterrence. Given enough time and firepower or whatever else you want to call it, anything is, breakable, but it's just how hard do you make it in relation to the rewards of getting it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And then how does that then affect you? Is something that I've been thinking about too lately. We've been pretty fortunate, but we've had cars broken into, and fortunately not our house or anything like that, but it really affects you, and you start to get a little paranoid, and then you start to imagine that the same thing is going to happen the same way when, in all honesty, it's probably not going to be. It's going to be something else that you don't expect. So it's like how those things affect you makes a huge difference too. Whereas if you just kind of let it bounce off you and be like, whatever, as long as you're not physically hurt, and you don't let it affect you, then I think you're better off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to lose perspective on a kind of absolute scale, because obviously the worst thing is when something happens to a person that you care about. But if the worst thing that happened to you is someone stole your bike or something, it can feel like a shock because it's kind of a big disruption in relation to what you expect and what you've experienced. So yeah. But because I'm actually in the process of getting a cargo bike. So it's like a big bike where I could put the kids on the back, or going even to a grocery store and buy a lot of food and stuff like that. So I'm thinking about how do I protect this, because they're not exactly cheap. So I'm thinking how can I deter people from stealing my vehicle. But I don't know. Obviously, I want to be able to track where it's going and have some kind of a very hefty lock. But other than that, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you have some ideas, but
I don't know. Paint it pink and put tassels on it. I don't know.
Yeah, so strategy of making it as unappealing and not resellable as possible. Right.
Yeah, there's probably a multifaceted approach, like like you're saying, pretty hefty locks, stuff like that. Maybe some way of if you can find a privacy-minded way of tracking it, so you can track it down, maybe with at least one GPS tracker on it. But there's also for bikes, I don't know. It's probably global, but here there's a website servicing where you can register your bike, And that way, if anybody else comes across it, so if they're buying it on like Marketplace or something like that, they can look it up. There's like a serial number or something that they can look up, and they can find. There's a way that they can figure out like if it's stolen or who it belongs to. Again, in a private way, so it's not just exposing all your information.
Yeah, that's actually a good thing to know. Because I'm sure if they certainly if they try and sell it to like a bike store or something, they'll get caught. Unless it's like not a very legit bike seller person. But yeah, that's a good one. I also thought about like having an alarm on it with like a motion sensor. So if they're actually moving it, it's going to start blaring like 100 decibels at you. So that's going to be, and like you said, it's about layers of deterrence, like multi-angles.
Right.
Because one thing might not deter them, but if there's like suddenly 2 and 3, they might start to think, okay, this isn't worth it. They have to do multiple problem solving at the same time. So
yeah.
What
would you have it? What are you imagining, like a siren or something, or?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen the devices. I was just brainstorming with Claude AI, and apparently there are. Because I was thinking, like, I want to have. Because if I like take the bike to the gym and park it next to the gym and lock it on a pole or something, I don't just want to have that chain be the only thing that's prevent or like deterring them. But if they try and move it, it's gonna detect that, because I mean it shouldn't be moving at all anyway, and then it's gonna start blaring like 80, 90, 100 decibels, and then it's like, okay, maybe I don't want to touch this thing. And some of those have trackers inside as well. So
okay, yeah, that would make sense. Don't some people just take off? They have a way of quickly taking off like the front tire or something. I mean, they lock it up, but then they also just take the tire with them.
Yeah, I've seen that. I think I guess it depends on the specific mechanics of the bike. I'm probably less worried about that, because it used to be the case that like when I was younger, people would actually steal bikes and drive them away. But these days, I think it's more about like more organized stealing and reselling the whole thing. So if it's missing a tire, they might still steal it because the body or the chassis, I don't know what you call that on a bike, but it's going to be still worth like a lot of money. So they might still steal it. And one of the things like people used to do back in my childhood was take the seat off and take it with them. So then nobody could well, you could still drive it away, but it would be a bit awkward to stand. So yeah, I'm probably less worried about those individual thieves rather than organized, like let's go steal e-scooters or e-bikes or things like that. So I'm afraid something like that might not be enough to deter them.
So a cargo bike, does that have any sort of like battery to help, or is it just all pure pedal power?
Yeah, they have batteries, and then there's like a motor, which obviously transfers the assistance force in there. So because especially like some of these bikes are really heavy, they can be like, I think one that I had a look at was like 40 kilos. I don't know how much is that in pounds. It's probably like my conversion is really bad, but it's
better than mine.
It's like 2 barbells basically. If you've held a barbell, from that point, like just pedaling on them is not going to be very viable for a lot of people. So it basically makes the whole thing kind of move, and obviously it helps your workload as well. And if you have this kind of really heavy bike and you have actual cargo on it or something you've loaded on it, you're going uphill, you're going to need assistance.
Oh yeah, that's true.
A lot of them, they have a fair bit of power. And I think you can also just cruise with them using the battery, but obviously that's not very not ideal use of it. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it kind of makes it more viable and powerful as a vehicle.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I don't ride a bike as often as I should. It's just the drivers. They're crazy. I always try to give, if I see a bicyclist, I'll give them plenty of room and stuff. But the times that I've ridden bicycle, it's like a free for all, you know?
Yeah,
I hope I'm going to get home alive, you know?
Yeah, I've heard pretty wild stories, not only about the US, but specifically California drivers.
Yeah.
Are the stories true?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the area, I'm sure. And then, you know, I mean, the other thing too is like, you notice all the bad driving, and so just naturally that's what sticks with you, and you don't notice everybody who's you know, good defensive driver, uses their blinkers, all of that. Like, you're not going to remember those people. So that kind of skews your perspective in some ways.
Yeah. And I've also heard that the what would you call it? Not the infrastructure, but the layouts of the cities are very much made for driving cars.
Oh yeah.
So is biking sort of, is it difficult or dangerous because of that, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, I would say that here in Santa Rosa, things are starting to change because there are a lot of bicyclists. We have a lot of nice, like, kind of open country roads, and then also city centers. And so the open country road kind of feel, those areas, there's always a lot of bicyclists, you know. And then lately, in a couple areas in town, they're actually removing lanes and replacing them with like protected bike lanes, which is really cool because it makes it so much safer for them. And actually driving in some areas is a little easier too, because you don't have all the lane changing and stuff. It's just one lane, you know. So I would say it's probably better here in Santa Rosa than other areas, and it's getting better.
Yeah.
There's still some areas that I'm like, if I were on a bike, I'm not quite sure how I would get from A to B, you know. Like, you'd have to get creative.
Yeah. But I will say, in defense of drivers, or I don't know if, well, let's go with that. Cyclists are super dangerous a lot of the time. Like, one of the things I strongly dislike is that they kind of pick and choose their rights on the road. So they will, you know, shift from a bike lane to a road if the bike lane sort of not necessarily, doesn't even have to end, but there are a lot of like situations where they pick and choose. Are they pedestrians now or cyclists, without understanding that you can't just change it in the middle of what you're doing. Like, if you're crossing like a crossing, like, I don't know if is that what it's called? Yeah, you should actually be like, get off the bike and, you know, not cycle across the crossing, unless there's a specific like bike lane for that. But they do a lot of dangerous things, like they can go from like cycle lanes to the road suddenly, and they just decide, oh, now I'm a car. Or like, basically now I have the kind of rights or status of a car. And it's without any indication of what they're going to do. And that's unfortunately quite common in my experience. But I don't know if that's,
here
maybe
too.
Cyclists are going to get mad at me, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think there's some bill in California right now it's about whether or not cyclists can do a rolling stop at an intersection. So like, say you've got like a 4-way stop with stop signs or something, rather than coming to a complete stop, if they can kind of just, you know, look around, slow down and keep on going, like almost like they're treating it like a yield. And maybe I'm not experienced enough in terms of biking, but I would want to come to a stop and look, because I know how drivers can be, you know. I would say that's, you know, you lose your momentum, sure, but I mean, better to stay safe.
Yeah, better to not die than to do. You said yield. What does that mean in this context?
So a yield would be where a full stop isn't mandatory, but you would slow down and make sure that it's clear to proceed.
Do you have like a specific sign for that?
Yeah, there is a specific sign. And then do you have roundabouts?
Yeah.
Do you have those? So that would be, in my mind, an example of something where you have a lot of yields, because you can enter the roundabout safely as long as there isn't another car or pedestrian or bike or whatever, as long as it's safety, but you don't have to come to a full stop unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Awesome. Well, we did a bit of a segue here at the beginning, which is the best way to start episodes. But I mean, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for doing this, and thanks for taking the time to be on the podcast. I know you have a lot of things to do. Even before I knew you had kids. So thanks for taking the time.
Of course. Yeah. Wait, this is the parenting, biking podcast, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's what it's. The BABA is biking and parenting advice.
Babies. I don't know.
Baby advice. Yeah.
Right.
Perfect. Awesome. And at any point, if you want to take a break to use the restroom or go take a snack, just let me know. No issues there.
Sure.
I think, for those who are watching, they're probably wondering who you are. We have stuff in the title, I'm sure. But what I know about you is that you're the owner of Orange Tree Samples, and you are like a sample library, virtual instrument developer company. Is there anything else you would sort of add to that in terms of what you do or who you are?
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Sample libraries. Yeah, I've always had a passion for developing virtual instruments. I do enjoy writing the demo songs too. So the work does encompass some different tasks and stuff.
So we can add musician, artist there as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about that earlier. I was like, if I wasn't writing demo songs, because I don't really have a lot of time to write my own music, so I don't even really know what kind of music I would write, or if I would use virtual instruments or just prefer all live instruments.
Yeah. What sort of instruments do you play?
So I started on piano when I was 8 years old. I started taking piano lessons and stuff. And then when I was a teenager, I got into playing bass and then eventually guitar. I think when I was about 17, I got my first guitar. And I feel like, I know at the time my parents were a little bit concerned that my attention would be diluted among all these different instruments, but they
didn't know.
They
didn't know
do
what
contribute, to your just overall knowledge of music. I've dabbled with other instruments, mostly for my own learning when developing a sample library. I like to really get into the mechanics of it and all of that, but I would say those are my three main instruments.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised. It kind of makes perfect sense once, considering what I know about the instruments you make. We'll come to this later, but what you do with Orange Tree Samples is, frankly, kind of magical and super impressive to me because I play the keyboard. I'm not a guitarist, but I've worked with guitarists enough to understand the instrument pretty well. And your ability to kind of bridge the two into a format that I can play a keyboard like this here and actually reproduce something that sounds like the guitar is, well, I don't know any other companies who can do that. So it doesn't surprise me that you actually have the practical experience of the two.
Yeah. Oh, I really appreciate that. I think what I'm trying to achieve for that is to help like keyboard players, for example, kind of experience what it's like to play a guitar without actually having to learn. But, you know, to start, getting used to some of the terminology and appreciation for like, the effects to use, some of the different technique. And in some way, ultimately inspire them to play things that they wouldn't necessarily play just with a piano sound, for example. I would say from an early age, that's kind of what attracted me to sampled instruments, is the way that there's that feedback loop where it makes you play differently because you're hearing the sound of a guitar come out of the keyboard,
Yeah. No, I would definitely say that your work ticks all of those boxes for sure. And that's what I love about your stuff, is because is that I can, as long as you have enough knowledge about what a guitar sounds like and how it behaves as an instrument, if you have that and then you press some keys, because a lot of your presets, they already have the pre-decided articulations and, what is that preset or patch going to do? What kind of, I guess articulations is the term here, and how it's mapped. You can just place your fingers on the keyboard and hear the connection to what you have in your mind and what you're hearing now. And you can be like, oh yeah, this is that thing that you can do with a guitar. And obviously with your libraries, you can change them around and do whatever you want. But that's what I love about the presets, because they equip me with a perspective that I can understand and relate to what I know about the instrument, and then just start playing and be like, I'm a guitar player now, basically. Right. So it's really cool. But yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk to you because back in, I was trying to think what year it was. It was probably 2015, 16, 17, somewhere around there. I had graduated from university. I studied music technology and music composition. And then right after university, I was doing this kind of like a band stuff for maybe a year. But I didn't find my sort of sound or thing with that. And for some unexplainable reason, I always knew that I wanted to do orchestral music, and especially like video game music, but I wanted to do orchestral music. And it was never like a conscious decision, really. I just sort of felt that in my head. And around that time, 16, 17, 15 maybe, I just knew that I needed to get my first set of orchestral sample libraries. And I was pretty familiar with the space. Like, I knew some of the big players. And then I was like, okay, I need to write this album now. I made like a space orchestral album as my first thing. And then I knew, okay, I need to buy the stuff now. I need to commit to something. And I wanted to get something proper, but also the playability was a huge thing for me. Because I heard some of the libraries from some of the other companies, which I won't mention because I don't want to, shit on anybody. Right. And they would sound great, but very few of them sounded amazing, like right out of the box. Like, you had to do passes of, not scripting, but programming. Yeah. And all the legatos were non-existent back then. The releases were kind of awkward. Even the I guess intro part of the sample was also not very good. And you could do great sounding things if you knew how to use them, but I didn't hear the thing that I wanted to get, because I wanted instant playability, instant realism, and I didn't want to have to do like 5 passes of programming the thing to make it work. And I thought, like, why can't I just play and have it be almost there, and then do like one mod wheel pass of the dynamics that I want? So I was looking around, and then I bumped into Cinesamples, and I was pretty much immediately like, okay, this ticks all of the boxes. Sounds great, realistic, super playable. I've never even seen anything like that before. And I thought, like, why is this not a bigger thing? Like, it just made sense to me at that time. And also the pricing was something that was accessible to me. So basically, I bought the core sets, I think, for Cinesamples, and I thought, like, this is, excellent stuff. And obviously, then a few years later, as I had been doing more sample library stuff, and I needed guitars, then I bumped into Orange Tree Samples, and I was like, wow, same thing again. I'm like, this is super playable, super realistic. This is exactly what I want. And then I, of course, learned later on that you were part of both of these companies and projects. So I was like, this is the guy that I first of all want to talk to, obviously, but also want to keep an eye on what you're doing, because to me, you understood that. I mean, there were obviously other people involved, I'm sure, but obviously you being the connecting link there was like, yeah, he gets it, and I want to keep an eye on what he's doing, because probably he's going to create something that I want to be using myself. So yeah, and I believe you developed the scripting technology.
Yeah, for like Cinesamples in their early days. I was just a contractor. I'm trying to remember the first project I did with them, because I know Cinebrass was one of the big ones. Hollywood Winds. Maybe that was the first one. They had a bunch of runs and stuff like that, and instead of using Kontakt's built-in tempo syncing, their time machine or whatever they call it, I kind of made a granular synthesis approach in Kontakt. So I don't know how CPU efficient that was, but it was different. I think the main thing that I was trying to address with that is when the run ends, you have a release, right? And if you put that into Time Machine, depending on if you slow it down or speed it up, that's going to affect that release time. And so I had this whole system of where, it'd speed up the run, but then as soon as it hits the end, it would just play back the normal part of the sample. So I think that's the thing that I enjoyed the most, was like trying to find creative solutions for, different problems.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it shows. Obviously, I don't specifically know all the things that you did with a lot of the libraries, but I mean, knowing what you do with Orange Tree Samples, it's like I knew that, this is someone who I want to be, following and seeing what they do. Relating to this, before we jump sort of deeper into your story, I mean, I intended this as like a warm-up question, but we've been warming up plenty. But I wanted to ask, what is the deal with oranges? Like, why oranges? Is there any kind of a story behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. It was, 2008, and I needed a name, and I was really into like magic tricks and illusions. And there's one called the Orange Tree, and it's basically a really complicated mechanical thing with like the trick is you could have an orange tree grow like before the audience's eyes and even sprout little oranges. It was a real magic like device. It was a real device that somebody invented in like the 1800s or something. I think they show it in the movie The Illusionist, if you happen to have seen that.
I haven't seen that. No.
That's in that movie. And so to me, that kind of like aligned with my interests in terms of, developing these libraries that have all this like intricate scripting behind them, kind of the mechanism inside of that Orange Tree device, so I called it Orange Tree Samples. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I now that things are, maybe sample libraries, there's a little bit of confusion with samples and like DJ and sampling. So, sometimes it feels like virtual instruments is a more understandable term. So in retrospect, I needed a name,
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of very confusing terminology like that in the music tech industry for sure.
Yeah.
It's like trying to explain to somebody what a sample library is. They're like, library, sample, like what? And you're just like, okay, it's like an instrument, but in a computer, like a virtual instrument. And that's, very confusing.
Yeah, and then you run into people who know what it is. And you're like, wait, I don't have to explain it to you? Like, oh, sample libraries. Yeah, like, on the keyboard and computer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I think there was a barber once or something. She was like, oh, yeah, no, I work with those. Yeah, I know what those are. And then there was another, I think it was a dentist. It's always those, people who have to make small talk, right? And he was like, oh, so you make air guitars. You sell air guitars. And I was like, sure, I love that explanation. Air guitars.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, once I was at a doctor's office, and they were doing like I think it's called an ENMG test, which is not super pleasant. They basically put these needles in you, and then they basically send electric signals through your nerves. Okay. And then they measure the time it takes it to travel to see if you have some nerve issues, because I've had I still do have nerve issues in my body. So they do that. It's not nice. They look for the nerves, and they put the needle in there and send the electricity through, and it kind of feels like your nerves are being electrocuted, basically. But this guy was like, he was doing the small talk, and he was like, oh, okay, music. Yeah, I'm actually into music. And I've bumped into quite a few of these types of people. They tend to be like dentists or doctors. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of have like a semi-passion in music. Yeah. And this guy had like invested a lot of his doctor money into audio gear. So he had like a, pretty high spec stuff and like a small recording studio at his home. But it always, it's really funny because they talk about it in a kind of semi-passionate way. Like it's like a very passionate hobby, but it never kind of bumps up from that place. And they like talking about it. They're very, very interested in it. They invest thousands of dollars in there, and they have like a high-paying job and then kind of do it on the side. So this guy was recording tracks for like local artists here. And I don't know, he didn't talk about his aspirations at all, but I guess it was like a fun thing for him. But yeah, that's an interesting profile of a person that I've bumped into quite a few of those along the years.
Yeah, but, that's interesting.
Yeah. I was thinking I had something I wanted to latch on there. Oh yeah, the magic stuff. Mm-hmm. How much of that have you done? Like how far into the magic rabbit hole did you go? Because that's something I could see myself getting into, like if I was younger. Because I remember my mom or dad, they got me and my brother like this small magic set. Okay. And one of my favorite things in there was there was like a fake thumb you could put on your thumb. And there was obviously what do you call it? Like a handkerchief or whatever. Yeah. And you could obviously have the thumb on, and then at some point you could do this and put it in your hand, and then you shove the handkerchief in your hand and put the thumb back, and then it disappears. And I was so excited to do that trick all the time. And there were some other ones in there as well, but they were a bit too difficult for me because I was quite young back then. But I've always been super fascinated by how you can change reality or change the perception. I'm like a super perception obsessed person, but it was very interesting to me and like felt very powerful. Like you could sort of like feel the air when people are observing you do magic. So I've always been very passionate about that. Like very interested in it, but I never went any deeper into it. I did at one point. I wanted to buy like a magic book and learn, but I guess it wasn't strong enough of a pull. But what was your, like, how deep did you go yourself?
Yeah, I think I like, knowing how things are done and then in order to appreciate the time that goes into, not just the people who develop, the different routines, and the, if there's any kind of gadgets involved in them, but then also just like, when it comes to like coin magic or card magic, just the sheer amount of just hours and hours of practice, that go into it, in a way, really remind me of music and learning music and all the hours of practice, and instead of listening to other musicians, they're watching what other magicians are doing and kind of picking up on that. So I never really got into the performance aspect of it, beyond just the little card tricks here and there, right? Usually pretty simple stuff that's kind of, what do they call that? Like a self-solving, it's kind of designed to work correctly,
like
without
math,
a lot of work.
basically.
Yeah, math-based, or things like that. Or you use like a pretty simple gimmick, like a short card or something, though that's always cool because it just works.
What does a short card mean in that
one
context?
of your cards is trimmed a little shorter than the other. Sorry, I was never in the Magic Club, so they can't kick me out. Anyway, YouTube, makes all this stuff. It's all public knowledge now. But you trim one card a little shorter, and that way when you riffle through the deck, it'll just pop to that position in the deck. Or you can also use it if you've ever seen the magic trick where they say, okay, I want you to think of a card and I'm going to kind of riffle the deck in front of your eyes, and then you just, think about whatever card you see and you latch onto, like remember that card and it'll be used later. But the way that the short card works is that it makes a certain card be visible for slightly longer than the others, and so it just naturally sticks in your mind. It's just one of those crazy brain things, and probably works trick. Probably maybe it fails every once in a while. Somebody will, for whatever reason, notice a different card.
I was thinking about the stats. Like, is it like 97% of the time?
Right. But when you edit the video, you don't show those, right? You only show the times it works.
Sure.
But yeah, so I never got into the performance thing, but just like really, I love watching different magicians, whether that's like, the Penn and Teller, their own shows, and then, what's the name of their, where they judge other magic acts. That one's really cool too, because there's a lot of up and coming magicians from all around the world that get to show just a variety of anything from, coin and card magic and close-up stuff to those big stage acts with, all of the elaborate, gadgets.
Yeah. That's one of the things, like, you have to be, especially like when you're facing something like the landscape today in magic. And again, I don't know much about it, but I can imagine that, like you said, a lot of the stuff is out there online, either as free or people can buy courses or whatever. So a lot of the stuff is now in the known. So it's very difficult to, especially if you're trying to fool or trick or magicify someone like Penn and Teller and do something that they can't figure out. That must be insanely difficult to do.
Yeah.
So like not only is there the creativity aspect, like how do you even come up with a concept that is something that other people can't understand, even if they're super educated in the field, and then to do all the technical stuff and studying it, figuring it out. Because I would imagine you would probably have to start with the outcome. Like, what is something that people can't believe it just happened or is true? And then you try and reverse engineer step by step, like, how can I make that happen? It must be immensely difficult, and you need to have like a mind for it.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know a lot about like what goes into actually developing, but that seems like a pretty legitimate way to do it. Like, imagine the result, or imagine some sort of, crazy scenario, and then develop, okay, well, what leads up to that? What different, techniques can you employ to get there? But as you know, a lot of it is about the story, behind the magic trick, in the way that it's set up, and it's usually not just one technique. It's usually a lot of different things combined. But yeah, I guess what you touched on is that it feels like, with YouTube and people just kind of like putting out the solutions, it's forced magicians to be more and more creative. And I feel like it's the same way with virtual instruments, where we have round robin and release samples and legato samples, but it's like there's still a lot more that we haven't discovered, and the bar keeps getting pushed higher and higher.
Yeah. Is there somebody in the virtual instrument space, sampling space, outside of your own company, of course, who's very interesting to you, like to follow what they're doing and working on and developing? Are there any notable company or people names that come to mind?
Yeah, I think the one that comes to mind is Pathfinder cello. I think it's Oster Sounds. What's his name? Ben. That's a really cool library if you're familiar with it. Just a really creative approach, and it sounds realistic too. But it's all based around a lot of different, legato voices and stuff like that. And yeah, it sounds really realistic. And it's one of those, I guess it's one of those libraries I would categorize as not being something that you load up and you want it to play an exact part. But it's one of those libraries that you load up and it almost like it like partners with you. Like you load up one of the presets and you're like, it inspires the music instead of just, handing it the sheet music, say, play this, make it sound as realistic as you can. So I love that collaborative element to virtual instruments too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that shows in your work. Is like one of my favorite libraries from you is the songwriter guitar, because that one has especially a lot of the stuff that uses the noise and the cassette tape noises, and especially the older, like there's like some 70s guitars and things like that. They're really, really cool because they, like, it's a kind of creative, inspirational loop. Like you're playing it, but it's never quite the same. I mean, obviously you can replicate like a specific take if you want, but it just feels alive. Like it doesn't feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over again and trying to get it perfect. You do get it perfect, but it feels like an actual performance. So I think that definitely comes across in your work as well. Is there any other developers?
Yeah, that's a good.
Companies?
I know there's got to be. What was that? I just saw one that was what's it called? I want to say it's called Skaka, Skaka. I'm trying to remember the name of the company. It's got like shakers and brushed instruments and stuff, and they have a really cool way of drawing in the patterns.
I can try and have a look if I can.
Oh yeah, thanks.
By the way, if you see or hear me typing while we're talking, it's not that I'm doing Klevgrand.
Klevgrand, yes.
Yeah.
Their stuff is so creative.
I believe it's Swedish, so it's probably Klevgrand or something like that.
Yeah.
But if you see me doing typing, it's because I had something come to mind and I want to write it down before I forget it. Maybe it's for like a later part of this discussion, so I'm not just doing other stuff.
Gotcha. Their stuff is. Trying to remember some of their other products. They all tend to be pretty creative, and I think they did a new version of that lets you use your phone as a controller for like a shaker and stuff, and so you can actually play it in using the motion from your phone, which is just, that's mind blowing,
Yeah, that's definitely an aspect in this space that I'm very interested in, because I feel like the process. I mean, I love instruments that I can just basically have my keyboard and maybe a mod wheel, and that's it. And I can just feel the different articulations by the way that I play. But I am feeling now like I would want to have something like something physical. Like there are obviously these different like laser sensors that you can move your hand like this, and there's that one thing that kind of scans in 3D your hand, and you can map that to do other like expressions and things like that. I would also love to get is it called the Osmose keyboard? The one with the MPE stuff. I would love to have that thing, but it's bloody expensive. So
yeah, same. Yeah,
maybe I need to try and pull some strings and see if I can lend it for a time and then disappear off the face of the earth and never do anything online ever again. But yeah, that kind of space is definitely, because I sort of sometimes yearn for the physicality of performing, because I'm a drummer primarily. Like that's the instrument that I'm the best at. Not that I'm anything special, but that's the one I'm sort of most, I guess, trained in. And but yeah, sometimes I feel like I wish I could like conduct in a way, conduct the orchestra, but have that be something I can translate into the instruments. And I think that's probably, it's maybe like a type of a composer who likes that. But I would love to be able to imagine this idea is just coming to me as I speak, but imagine I could play all my parts down, strings, brass, woodwinds, and then at the end, I could like open like one of those, 3D scanners that scans my hands. And then I can conduct the whole thing through and like give it some cues about like how to interpret things, I guess.
Yeah.
But basically I could control and draw in all the dynamics with that performance. I mean, that's basically what you're kind of doing with a mod wheel, and you're, moving it around. But a way in which I could do that for the entire orchestra at the end as well. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is like a weird, ambitious idea. I don't know. But it's just something that I'm feeling like I would need.
Right. Yeah, and tempo too. That would be great for, controlling the dynamic and tempo, and, if you have to have certain things, happen at a specific timing, that could be really useful too.
Yeah, that's a really good point, to have it be, because that's one of the things that is kind of difficult to achieve in the DAW environment. You can obviously do your tempo mappings and have it shift around, but again, you're going to have to program those points and do it that way. So that's a really good point, that it would be sort of reading your tempo cues as well.
I wonder if some of that is like, having played with, different drummers over the years, drums are, you are pretty much the conductor. Like, unless you're playing in a big band or something and you need somebody conducting, for example, you kind of act as a conductor, because what you do with the dynamics, affects the entire band, right? I mean, ultimately, you're the one dictating the beat, so, as well as the dynamic and stuff. So I wonder if that's part of that, from your drumming, that you want to have that conducting ability.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I have a very long background in choir stuff as well. So I've never conducted anything myself, but obviously I was in the local boy choir for 9 years, from like age 6 to 15, I guess. Wow. And it was like, it's not just a boy choir, it's the choir for the main church in this city. So it's kind of like the biggest deal in this small part of the world. Yeah. But we did a lot of, I don't even know how many masses we did, and performances and concerts. But basically, it's maybe it comes from that as well, because you are being conducted by the conductor, and also we got to perform with orchestras quite a bit as well, like chamber ones, and sometimes even, I think, we did some symphony stuff a few times as well. So you obviously get to kind of experience and interpret the music through the conductor as well. And it was also very interesting how you would know very quickly if you liked a conductor or not. Sometimes they were like insufferable. You're like, this language that they're speaking with their hands is just, it doesn't speak to you at all. Like sometimes, I remember this one guy who would always he would be like ahead of the tempo a bit, always pushing, and everything was like super violent and fast. And I was like, it didn't work for me. But, some people are beautifully like lyrical and just like flowy, and kind of they almost give the performers space to become a part of their, conducting. And it's a fascinating job. Like, it's such a weird thing to try and analyze and explain to somebody how it works. And I haven't actually thought about that in a while, but it's a very interesting profession. Like, what is even going on?
Yeah. I mean, just the idea of translating dynamics and tempo to physical motion, is pretty cool. I wanted to get into, and like the Osmose or whatever, it's just the price associated with it. But like, there's something called Mind to MIDI, I think, where, you use the electrodes, and then you can just use your mind to, maybe you're playing MIDI notes, or maybe you're conducting.
Okay.
But I like the idea of that also being a way of like exercising certain capabilities, to control your thoughts to trigger different things.
Yeah. Do you know what it reads? Does it read brainwaves, or how does it work?
Yeah, so it's reading brainwaves, and there's probably depends on how many electrodes you use, how detailed that can get, and there's some calibration associated as well. So it's like, think about the taste of a lemon, and then it calibrates based on that, and then think of this, so it gets some different ideas of what to look for.
So is it basically like an open system, so you can basically train it on some sort of set of things and on some kind of a basis, and then you can assign it as you will, or as you want?
Yeah, that was my impression. It was one of those things where I was like, that's really cool. And then I see the price, I'm like, maybe not right now.
How much is it?
Bookmark it for later. I mean, I think there's software. Let me see. I think that's the name of the software, Mind to MIDI, and that's one thing. That might be open source. But then you would need to go and buy the actual EEG device. And then that's just like, that seems like one of those things that's, what's your budget,
Like, how much resolution do you want to have?
Yeah. Do you
So I see a wild image with it's basically like a helmet, like a fabric helmet you put on, and it has, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, that's like 20, 30 electrodes maybe. Okay, yeah, delta wave, theta wave, beta wave, alpha wave. Is there a price here somewhere? They are being pretty, they don't seem to give it anywhere here.
That's just the software I was looking at. I guess that's what would convert it into MIDI notes. Though I couldn't see why you couldn't write your own or vibe code it or something.
Yeah. Do you know any examples of what you could do with that? Like, could you basically write an entire song by just thinking about it in MIDI?
I think you would have to set some rules first, about like what the tonality is, what the different notes that you can trigger. I'm not sure how exact the timing could be. I've seen people use those devices to like drive, remote control cars around and stuff like that. And they have to really like put a lot of thought into it, obviously. But to me, it just feels like that's something that, hey, what would it be like if you get to that like 10,000 hour, point, like how good could you get at triggering MIDI? Could you get the timing more exact? And,
I'm just sort of imagining, because this process of writing music can already look super like laborious. Is that the word? Laborious? I don't know. Yeah. To well, not only myself, but certainly other people. And now I'm just imagining that I show up to the studio and I put this fabric helmet on with like 30, 40 electrodes on. And then I just close my eyes.
I'm going
turn
in.
on the, it's like the Matrix. You just lean back and you just turn into Neo. And then you're completely like mentally exhausted and fatigued. And do that for like 3 hours and sweat. And you're like, I just wrote a symphony.
Right.
That's the only way I can imagine making this any more absurd than it is already. But that's super funny. I would actually love to make a video on that for YouTube. Maybe I could send them a message in. I don't know.
Yeah.
Trying to work something out. But that would be super funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool stuff.
Yeah, so there's some creative MIDI devices like that. I know there was a project to use like those Wiimotes, as MIDI devices, and then there was the who was it that did the gloves with the sensors on them? I want to say Bjork, but it probably wasn't. I forget.
Yeah, I don't know who originally. I think I saw something like that. This is turning into a Googling session.
Gloves. Yeah.
MiMU gloves.
Yeah.
The world's most advanced wearable musical instrument for expressive creation, composition, and performance. Maybe this could be an interface for my orchestral conducting stuff somehow.
Imogen Heap. That's who did it. The gloves. That would be cool.
Okay.
I mean, I think the what you were talking about, the 3D scan. I just wonder if the gloves would be more precise.
Yeah, I would imagine they are.
Now, if you put the gloves on the helmet, I mean, now we're talking.
We're reaching levels that shouldn't be possible. MIDI controlling. I mean, I love the idea. It's just so absurd and stupid and awesome. And you put the helmet on and the gloves. And imagine just somebody walking in and I'm here like sweating like this and moving my hands.
They see the cursor moving around and stuff recording. And,
or even worse, there's no screens on. And it's just, I'm in a dark room by myself doing this and like sweating and trying to.
That's what I feel like. That's what VR promised. Right? You put on the VR helmet and you interact with sound and instruments directly, and for whatever reason, it just didn't seem like it panned out.
Yeah. Yet. Yeah. I think it kind of seems maybe cool if you're playing like a video game like that, but a composer in a dark dungeon with his like gloves and helmet. And then I can imagine you taking a break and walking to the lobby to have a coffee and there's someone else there and you're in your helmet and gloves and you're completely sweaty and exhausted and getting your coffee and just looking like 50 or 60 different cables hanging from your head. And
I think we're beyond coffee at that point.
Yeah, it's speed and composition. Right. You're going to need some serious nootropics for that process. Do you have any, if you think about this aspect, do you feel completely content with the tools that you have at your disposal when it comes to creating virtual instruments and doing stuff for Orange Tree samples? Is there something in this sort of department or domain that is something you would like to explore? Or do you feel like the tools are, in a good place?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hardest thing, especially with, since we do a lot of guitars, and a lot of times people are controlling them from a keyboard, from a MIDI keyboard, it feels like you're translating from fewer dimensions into more dimensions, because you can't just play a key on the keyboard and then also tell it what fret and string to use. There has to be some interpretation. And so that's kind of the most difficult part. I wish there was a better way, and I think in some way the is it Osmose? Osmose, the name of that controller with the MPE and you can play in vibrato.
Yeah, I think that's the name of the controller itself. What is the company? It's something E. Oh crap!
Oh,
what is this?
Yeah.
Something E. Osmose Expressive E is the company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that unlocks some expressiveness for keyboard players in a way that's very accessible. Like I bought a Rolly Seaboard, and it's cool, but you have to. It's only good for triggering certain instruments with, at least from what I found. For certain synth sounds or stuff like that, where you really need that glidey sound going on, it works well. But if you want to play, it's not that great for I don't know. I didn't have a great experience trying to play guitar with it. It would probably work well for slide guitar or lap steel or pedal steel.
Yeah. I guess it's maybe partly because, at least with a keyboard, there is a plucky, more mechanical thing, like you have it with a guitar. But if it's a Seaboard, it's just kind of maybe too flowy. So I can see what you're thinking there. It makes sense.
I think, and this might just be a very personal thing for me, but the whole idea of pressing into the key bed and then moving your fingers side to side doesn't feel very physically comfortable to me. It feels like my fingers aren't really made to, move and and have that force in that direction. And so
you're gonna find yourself at the ER and they're asking, how did you break your fingers sort of sideways, like shearing breakage?
We've got another Rolly Seaboard patient here. No, it is a cool instrument, and I think one thing that was kind of like a revelation to me was just the connecting it as a Bluetooth device to my phone, and then being here I am at my kitchen table without any sort of laptop or desktop computer and just playing sounds through it. I was like, you could easily just throw it and chuck it in a backpack and just use that as a MIDI device, portable MIDI device. So that part was cool to experience. But yeah, I think these days it mostly just sits in its case.
Yeah. Maybe you can sell it and get an Osmose. By the way, I was just having a look at their site. They seem to have a new product. It's a Osmose CE. So this is I guess it's a smaller version. So this one, there's a 49 key and a 61 key version. 49 key is just about $1,000 in euros. And the 61 key is $1,200. So that's actually, how expensive is the normal version? Okay, that's 1,800.
Yeah.
So seems like. So that's actually, because one of the things I want from this is just the MIDI control. I understand it has this synth engine in there. So I was hoping they would make a version without that, because I can't imagine I particularly want to be using that. So I wonder if this is okay, there is the synth in there as well with this one also. So it's a bit more affordable. It's still definitely boutique pricing, but it's more appealing. So
more in the range of just ordinary MIDI controllers. Like, I mean, on the high end, but you do have the benefit of being able to just easily play piano sounds as well.
Yeah. I was actually hoping they made a smaller one, because then I could maybe figure out a way to have it on my desk, because I would probably use that for specific, like writing specific melody lines or something like that. It's actually interesting you talked about the sideways motion, because it's something that I always did naturally without even knowing that there's a thing called aftertouch, and that you could do the vibrato with that. So it's something I always did, and I still do it. And I have a dope for PK88 here, which is the it's like the least expensive version of them, of the Dopefers. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it has the key bed, and this one doesn't have aftertouch. But even with this, I always do the vibrato thing, because it's something I do naturally. So that's when I saw something like the Osmose, I was like, I mean, probably need to try and get that at some point.
Yeah. I think for me, that motion, the side-to-side vibrato is not uncomfortable. I don't tend to naturally do that, but I definitely can see, I've definitely seen players just naturally do that. But I think it's the just sliding across to other keys, in a longer extended motion.
Yeah, I can see that. I know the feeling. It's not, it doesn't feel very nice to me either. But yeah, do you, before we jump into the next thing, I just wanted to ask, like, what is actually your favorite fruit? There's a lot writing on this because of your company name.
Right.
But if you might have to change it if the answer doesn't go the way I imagine. But
right. I really do like oranges.
That's the correct answer.
But the fact that it was an instant response, there was some hesitation. No, I got this I accidentally bought the orange juice that's the most pulp recently. None of my kids will drink it. They think it's gross. It's like a smoothie, but I'm here. It's delicious.
Yeah, that's the only way to. I'm kind of the opposite. The kind of orange juice that they offer on airplanes. It's like the most processed, most smooth, and it's still kind of bitter tasting orange juice. That's my kind of least favorite type. But yeah, I mean, the more it's actually just a blended orange, the better.
Yeah,
because you actually get the fiber, and it's a lot better for you.
I don't mind either. I mean, as long as it doesn't as long as it's not loaded with sugar and stuff like that, I guess. Like added sugar.
Yeah. So is your answer, it's oranges?
My final answer, I'll go with oranges.
You lock it in. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, really getting to I want to understand your sort of bigger story a bit better, and how you ended up doing what you're doing now. I mean, first of all, where were you born?
I was born in Austin, Texas.
Okay, then, the most trendiest place in the U.S. right now.
Right now, yeah. I'm not sure about back then, but we moved when I was about 3 or 4 years old, moved out to California. So even though I was born there, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm from Texas. I mean, I don't have the accent. I still feel like the times that I've gone back, I still feel like a tourist. So, but yeah, we've pretty much just been in the Bay Area since.
And so, when did you move? How old?
When I was about 3 or 4 years old, we moved. I forget if we went to the North Bay area at that point. Yeah, I think so, North Bay. And then I went to school at Sonoma State University, which is in Rohnert Park, sort of North Bay Area. Bay Area being like the San Francisco Bay Area. So I went to school there and got my. Where am I getting ahead of myself?
I mean, you can go anywhere you want. I'll cut you off if you go too far. But I mean, before you maybe move into that, so first of all, why did your parents move? And if you could tell a bit about what they did, like did they have jobs and what were they doing at that time?
Yeah, I think it was just work related. So both my parents were teachers. They would say BC, in the years BC, standing for before children. So they waited a while before having kids, and they didn't make a lot of money as teachers, unfortunately, and that's unfortunately still kind of the case. But anyway, so after that, once they had kids, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And then my dad got more into like training, in tech, especially like CAD programs, CAD software. And then that transitioned from like doing actual, trainings to documentation. So that may have been his first job. And the reason for moving to California was to, as he transitioned into becoming a tech writer. So he did all the like documentation for AutoCAD and stuff like that. And I think they won some awards, actually. He definitely their team put a lot of effort and thought into, how people learn, what the most efficient way is to teach them this complicated software. So I don't let him see my documentation because I know he'd have things to say.
Son, we have to talk.
Yeah.
Did you know I made the AutoCAD manual back in 1763?
Pretty much.
So what sort of they were teaching, but what level was that? Was it like elementary or high school or?
Yeah, I think my dad was doing more high school stuff like math and chemistry. And then my mom, what did she teach? I think she was more elementary age. Probably all the stuff, probably like English and, literature, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they were both, I should mention, they were both musicians in school. So even though I think my dad minored in music and my mom was a major in music, but then they both, after graduating, eventually just transitioned into teaching.
What did they play?
So my dad played trumpet, and then my mom played violin. And it was all, in the orchestral level at, San Jose State. So.
Okay. So pretty, advanced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that how they met?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they both went to San Jose State, so they met there, and, they're both in the music program and stuff. My mom continues to play violin and teaches private lessons too. So she's continued that. And then I think for my dad, once, having kids and then having the, pretty busy job and stuff, it was just difficult for him to keep up the trumpet playing. And then you know how it is, once you start getting a little rusty, then you stop practicing because you don't want to be reminded of how rusty you are. And yeah.
The solution to that is never become an instrumentalist. You don't, I just play stuff because I have to in order to make music. But I never, I mostly laugh at my technical limitations as a player, but I honestly never even think about it. Only when I bump into something like I want to write something, but I can't. So then I'll practice a bit. And then I'm like, wow, I didn't know I could do that. Or if it's like way beyond what I can do, then I just MIDI program, or I go very slowly and then just change the tempo of that.
Oh yeah. So, but I'm curious. Do you record things in through like a MIDI keyboard, or do you also have like a drum pad or anything like that?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of write, like composing and writing and recording music, I always perform it myself. I feel like I would have very little interest in like just drawing stuff with my mouse, and it feels very kind of separated from how I personally like to approach it. So I always play everything with the keyboard. I would love to have a MIDI drum kit. I think it would make my percussive parts a lot like faster to write and nicer if assuming I can calibrate the kit properly, because that would drive me crazy if it wasn't like a one-to-one dynamic interpretation. But I'm sure that's pretty straightforward to do. Maybe the thing would be to maybe just buy one really good pad and then just, play the parts like that. Maybe that could be a solution. But to be honest, I if you have a really good keyboard like this Doepfer, it's really heavily weighted. So I love stuff like this for like actual acoustic instruments, because it feels like they have like a lot of, well, not a lot, but like quite a bit of travel, and the weightedness of it is pretty much perfect to my taste. So I feel like I can always, whether it's a violin or brass or percussion, I feel like I can dig into it in a perfect amount. Like it gives me a good sort of organic resistance, I guess. Yeah, it's really good. Unless I need to do something super fast, then it won't, the keys won't return fast enough. Yeah. So that's the only limitation. And for that, I would love to have something faster. I used to have a synth, but I sold that. So, but yeah, as long as the keyboard has the right feel, then I have no issues playing the drum parts as well. So pretty much everything I do is with the keyboard, but especially when I'm doing some of the drum demos for the sample libraries or virtual instruments, I would love to have a drum kit here so I could just, play the stuff. It would be a lot better. Like my finger drumming it depends on what I'm doing. On a good day, I can be maybe good definitionally, but it's nowhere near as good as an actual kit. So, but I feel like I can do pretty much everything I need to with a keyboard as long as it has the right, specs, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was curious because I was listening to your music, the stuff that you've got on Bandcamp, and I was really impressed. I mean, not just the orchestral stuff, but all the synth, kind of like cinematic synth stuff was like really cool. There's like a consistency across the tracks too that I was really impressed by. Everything sounds really balanced. I feel like if I played a game with your music in it, I would just be distracted the whole time.
Well, there is cool. One game. It's called Breachway. Okay. I did the music for that. So I guess that would kind of mean that I failed at the task. But I guess that's kind of like, well, first of all, not everybody is going to... I think a musician or somebody who really loves the music in a game is always going to be caught by it in a different way. So, I mean, I certainly haven't... for the most part, like I haven't heard, I don't think, any negative feedback on that. Maybe, unfortunately, maybe some of it would be actually useful, but yeah, I'm guessing the amount of distraction kind of corresponds to the level of how good you think it is. Because if it is good music, it should kind of stop you in your tracks. But hopefully that, you can also play the game, which would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I meant that in a good way, distracted.
Yeah.
Where, you play a game and you're like, this is really good music. Well, I mean, it doesn't stop you from playing necessarily, but it just heightens the whole experience.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the thing that's kind of the number one thing I want to do, music for video games. And, luckily I've done, I've done like been part of like smaller things. Unfortunately, that didn't see the daylight at the end of the day, but Breachway is like the single like proper release that I've done. So yeah, I would love to do more of that. Are you into video games at all?
I wish I had more time to play video games.
Yeah, same.
I used to, I'm trying to think of some of the previous games that I played. I really got into Starcraft, and that obviously has great music. But then it became almost like a job. It was like because it's so much about like just memorizing builds and learning and improving your game. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be super fast and strategic in that game. So it's also very addictive because it's so much, fun and it's so engaging.
Yeah. I forget what other... I'll watch my wife play games. She's kind of at this point more of the gamer in the family.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, so I get to enjoy them, as, secondhand.
Cool. Do you remember any of the stuff that she's playing now?
Right now she's playing Subnautica and...
The new one?
I couldn't say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the new one released just some time ago. I think it's Subnautica 2, maybe, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sometimes she'll go back and play the, older games. She goes through a cycle, she'll be at a new game and then she'll go back and, every once in a while she'll go back and play like Red Dead Redemption, Like basically if the game has horses or something horse-like that you can ride around, she's played that game.
Nice. Good. It's like, what kind of games do you like? Horse games.
Yeah.
Mostly. Yeah. Subnautica has a great composer. I think it's by Ben Prunty. He's also done, do you know the video? It's like an indie video game called FTL.
Yeah.
He did that one.
Played it, but yeah.
Yeah, that's like, a lot of people love that for good reason. But yeah, great composer as well. And I think he did the new Subnautica as well.
Mm-hmm.
I actually haven't listened to that yet, but I should.
Yeah, I mean, I think, video games, like I'm thinking about growing up, that was definitely a big inspiration for me and pursuing computer music. I know if you know the composer Bobby Prince, he just passed away within maybe a couple days or something. He did the music for Commander Keen and...
That's
a lot of
something that my better half loves to play. She actually got because I when I was developing Breachway or writing the music for that, I had to get a gaming PC laptop so that I could test it and play it and test the music. And then she was like, "Oh, I want to play Commander Keen," and I'm like, out of all the things you could do with this.
Yeah.
And then I bought her Commander Keen, the package on Steam, and she played it manically because she used to play that when she was a kid. So that was very nostalgic.
Right. Yeah, and those are cool too because the music is just MIDI files, right? So you can just, anybody can just look and see how the music is composed. And similarly, the composer Alexander Brandon, that's his name, Alexander Brandon, who did the music for like Jazz Jackrabbit and Deus Ex and stuff. He did a lot of like tracker music, so they're all mod files, and so you can load them up and you have the samples in there and you can see how the music was made. So I love that aspect to it as well, where anybody can just load it up and see exactly how the tracks are composed.
Yeah. So did you play a lot of video games as a kid?
Yeah, growing up, we had a limited budget as kids, but we had some like I mentioned, Commander Keen, Jazz Jackrabbit, One Must Fall. That was a fighting game. We convinced my parents to let us have it. It's robots. It's not real people, right? And I mentioned Deus Ex, Starcraft 1, back then. So yeah, we played a lot of video games, but we also, our especially with my dad working at Autodesk, we always had like a copy of Animator Pro and 3D Studio before it was 3D Studio Max. So we had these like pretty crazy, like expensive software just available to us. And then like QBasic, get into a little bit of programming. So that was cool. We kind of go back and forth between playing games and then like trying to make games.
Nice. Yeah, I can imagine that's a pretty good foundation for some of the things you do today. You did briefly mention that, or I got the impression that your parents maybe had kids sort of maybe at a later age. Is that like, how old were they?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were, I want to say, mid to late 20s, and they. I have two older brothers and a younger brother and a younger sister, so pretty big family.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like a normal age these days.
Really, yeah.
Because I mean, unfortunately, people have kids, if at all, they have them pretty late, and then they might not be able to even have the amount of kids that they want.
Yeah. I mean, there's all factors that go into that, but at the same time, I mean, if that allows them to kind of pursue their interests, if they're doing it because there isn't like pressure to have a family, then that's great,
Yeah, that's definitely the difficulty with the process, because you might not always know what it is that you want, and it's kind of a unfortunate combination of things, because there is a biological reality about having kids, but then obviously I also do think completely that people should try and make their life look like their own and do the things that they want to do. But sometimes with age comes wisdom, and then you understand what you actually, that you did want to have kids, and then it might be sort of too late. But yeah, I mean, I was certainly like, I kind of wish I had kids when I was young. The reality of it was that I was nowhere near ready for that. I mean, by any metric of analysis. And I think people could argue that I wasn't ready for it when we got our kids. But I wish it was the case that I was, because it would be really awesome to be. I mean, I'm how old am I now? Am I 36 now? So I'm already feeling the kind of the energy changes in, how much I have to spend. And it would be awesome to be like very young and full of energy, and then, play with your kids. So from that angle, and it would be awesome because like by the time that they're relatively older already, you would still be pretty damn young, and still you could go off and do your careers and whatever else you want to do. But it's something I've been thinking about, because it's unfortunately you don't always know what you want to do, when you should probably be doing it. You can always, sometimes you can only see that in hindsight. And then, unfortunately we do get older. Maybe unfortunately, I don't know. That's also a different philosophical conversation for a different time. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's pros and cons, because if you have kids young, then maybe there's less time that you can devote to your own kind of self-development.
Sure.
And then maybe later on you would feel like you wish that you had your 20s to just do whatever you want,
Yeah.
It's definitely difficult, when you've got kids, things change, and like traveling and, all of that stuff is definitely a big change. So I don't know, maybe it goes both ways.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it just depends on who you are. I mean, the way I'm thinking about it is that because I'm trying to think, like, raising kids now, I think it would be amazing that by the time your kid is not even 18, but like 16, 17, 18, like they would be ready to take on the world, which was something that I could have never been able to say about myself. I mean, right now, I'm still like, can I take on the world? It's I'm trying, but that's kind of the goal that I wish would be nice. And by that time, being relatively wise about some of the fundamentals of life, and because I don't necessarily see any reason why you couldn't be kind of in a really good, mature, ready place by the time you're 18. It's obviously a very tall order to achieve that, but it would be amazing, because I don't think you necessarily need to spend like the entire of your 20s, figuring out who you are. Like, maybe it shouldn't take 10 years and certainly maybe not, and again, I'm not judging anybody. This is just me and reflecting on what I did. But maybe a bit less of, I never partied a lot, but even to me, like, more than I needed to, because I never liked nightclubs or anything like that. But it's just when you can't figure out where else you should be, it's kind of like you default into some of these default behaviors. So I definitely wish I made some different choices in my 20s, but definitely regardless of what you think, it's definitely a topic to reflect upon and think about, the choices you made. And if you have kids, then try and think about how you could facilitate something like a better framework for them to utilize. And because I think part of your job as a parent, at least for me, is to make sure that they're ready for the world when they get become of age. And then that's kind of your job, maybe not done, but for the big part of it is,
Yeah,
done.
totally. Yeah, I don't remember my parents ever saying anything about regretting waiting to have kids. I don't think so. I mean, I think they knew that they were not really ready or in a place financially to have kids at that point. So,
yeah. Was so I because they were musicians themselves, I'm guessing music was something that was around your house all the time. Was it something you grew up being surrounded by?
We all pretty much had to learn how to play piano. That was sort of a prerequisite, like you can do whatever you want, musically, but you got to have at least those fundamentals of, like, being able to read a little music, playing with left and right hands and stuff. So I think I probably was the only one in my family that really pursued it seriously beyond, I think my oldest brother, he'll strum a little guitar here and there, and I think my younger brother plays some music, but not professionally.
And so, where are you in the age order of your
I'm the middle
siblings?
child.
Right.
Yeah. I'm
okay.
Right in the middle.
What do they usually say about the middle child? Are there any like stereotypes about that?
Yeah, right. The middle child is kind of like the glue in the family, right? And so whenever there's any family drama, they feel like they have to be the ones to help, keep things together. And then they're also the ones that, like, didn't get enough attention, right? Because the firstborn gets a ton of attention, right? Because they're the novelty, right? And then that also happens with the youngest in the family too, right? Because then the parents realize, they're like, we're probably not having any more kids, so we got to this is our last chance, So and
try and fix all the mistakes from the previous ones with the last one. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that's the stereotype.
Were you actually did you find that applies to you?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely the trying to make sure everybody's happy, kind of dealing with definitely had to learn lessons about like not setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, all those types of things.
That's a very nice way of putting it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't come up with that, but yeah, I heard that and it sums it up.
Yeah, it's a pretty beautiful way of putting it. So, did you so you were playing the piano, at what point did you think, hey, this music thing is something that I might want to do? Or did you always know you wanted to do it? Or how did you sort of move into the realm of this is my thing?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think I was maybe 2 or 3 years into playing piano, and things were getting more challenging, and I got to the point where I was like, maybe I should just give up. Maybe I just want to quit. This is difficult. And then as soon as those words came out of my mouth, I was like, wait, I don't want to quit. Like, this has become part of my identity, like I want to continue with this. And so I would say, that's the point where I realized that like I wanted to just keep going at it. And then, around the same time too, and I think this is what ultimately led me into sampling and sampled instruments. We'd go up and visit my grandparents, and my grandfather was a music teacher for many years and stuff, played a ton of different instruments. So he always had a lot of instruments around, and he always had like keyboards, because he'd use them to do like arranging on for different school bands and stuff. And so I always look forward to, turning on his whatever, keyboard he had and just scrolling through the sounds and playing them and just like experience the way that those different sounds, even though they were like old cheesy, guitar sounds and bell sounds and stuff, like just the way that they made you play differently, So around that same time that I realized I wanted to pursue music, I also realized that like there's a lot of cool like, synthesizers and computers are all in that, equation.
Were you sort of, did the technology side of it speak to you sort of immediately? And how would you describe your kind of perception of the music tech side?
Yeah, that was always, I think that was always part of that kind of set of software that we had growing up. So I mentioned, Animator Pro and 3D Studio. We always had some sort of music program too. And I think it was Fast Tracker 2 for a while. And that's kind of what got me into, being able to load in some samples and write music. It's tracker based, so it's not, there's no musical score or anything, not even really a piano roll. So it's sort of a different way of looking at it. But then eventually we got Windjammer Pro, and that was like, we were just moving from like, I think DOS to Windows or something, and got that. And so that was the first program I had that let you actually write in, using MIDI and having actual score, So, I wasn't super serious about it at that point, but it was just one of those things on my radar that I'd mess around and try to come up with whatever random weird music.
Yeah. By the way, before I forget, I mean, your surname, I don't know how you pronounce it in the U.S.
In the U.S., I don't know if they know how to pronounce it either.
Go ahead.
It's Schlaepfer.
Schlaepfer, yeah. Because in Germany, they would probably say like Schlaepfer or something like that.
That's actually closer than the way Schlaepfer.
Yeah, it's kind of, the end is sort of softer. So do you know where your kind of family roots come from? Is it from Germany or
from Switzerland, like the Swiss German area. So like the Appenzell I've never been to Switzerland, but I would love
Should
to
go.
The amount of dairy, as somebody who's very lactose intolerant, the amount of dairy is frightening to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I should say probably in the EU at least, I think, I mean, here in Finland, it's pretty much the standard to get lactose-free products. I think we might have like the gene pool is such that I think in the world, most people actually have lactose intolerance, if I'm not wrong. Everybody check. I don't want to spread any false information.
That sounds correct to me.
Yeah. But I think in the EU, they are a bit better in general. But I think in Germany, it might be, or in that area, it might be a bit different. But I think actually a lot of the cheeses, for example, that you're probably maybe thinking about, I think a lot of them are naturally, they don't have lactose in them. So it's probably I don't know what you're specifically thinking about in terms of Switzerland and the foods, but at least from the cheese perspective, I think a lot of them don't have it naturally due to the process.
A lot of them, I think the lactose would be very minimal. Yeah. For me, it would kind of feel like taking a risk, even so. But I think you're totally correct about the lactose. There's it's usual to lose your ability to digest lactose, I think, by your 20s, but there's a mutation in the gene that's what allows certain people to continue, having lactose without any problems. Their body just keeps producing the lactase enzyme.
Okay.
So I guess we are the non-mutants. And Finland is back on my map. I guess that's cool to hear.
I mean, these days it's like everything is by standard lactose free. Like if you go to cafes or places like that, it's just a lot easier to just make it lactose free, and then people don't have to ask, or the restaurant doesn't have to bother with the extra work and stuff like that. And also, I think it's in. I think among some of the Asian population, like Korea, especially, to my understanding, I think they basically they don't have as much of the ability to, basically everybody there is lactose intolerant. So I think it's the same thing that the food is. They get rid of the lactose. Yeah, from what I've gathered.
Yeah, I mean here it's a little unfortunate, but I think it's probably just due to the always having a surplus in dairy here in the U.S., where it seems like they throw it in everything. Like, I mean, if you look at, bread, it's got, most of the time it contains milk, I guess it's dough conditioner or something. A lot of products that you wouldn't think have dairy. You go to McDonald's and their fries have dairy in them. It's like, how do you add, and then to make things worse, and I understand like with food production, if you're using shared equipment, it adds to the expense having to really sanitize all the equipment before you switch to producing dairy-free food. But sometimes they will intentionally add dairy to products because they don't want to be, even though they don't want to be liable, if somebody's got a dairy allergy, they don't want to say this is dairy-free just because they technically didn't add any dairy, just because there might be traces of dairy, left over from whatever they made last, using the equipment. So in certain cases, they will just intentionally add it to random products. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being in the US, and it was, at least in my experience, very difficult to, I asked about lactose in food, and they were like, what is that? A lot of people were like, I don't know what the hell is that?
Or they'll say, oh, it doesn't have milk, but it probably has eggs. And they're thinking of the dairy section, the store, not just dairy as in anything containing lactose. So it's like, no, eggs are okay. I'm not vegan, but
Yeah, I remember having something similar to that. Like, I don't remember what they said, but something along those lines. And I was very confused. And I understood that they had no idea what I was talking about. So I was like, yeah, sounds good. Let's go with that. Yeah. So what was your progression like from that point onwards? So you were going to your grandfather's place and playing with stuff, but like, how do we bridge the gap from like, okay, playing music, realizing that actually I don't want to give this up, and then getting more interested with the sampling side and the technology? Like, what was the progression like? And was there a point where you made the conscious decision to like actually pursue this? And was there a point like that? Because sometimes there isn't. But how would you describe that process?
Yeah, so the music technology side of this whole thing was always something that I just did on my own. So when I was 12, I started getting interested in music composition. And at that point, my piano teacher at the time, she was, having me do classical pieces and stuff like that. And she just said, that's out of my wheelhouse. You're going to have to find a teacher who can teach you like, composition, improvisation, and all of that. So she basically said, I'm going to be honest with you, you should look for somebody else. So we found another piano teacher who's a jazz piano player. And he was like he was an active teacher, but also an actively gigging musician too, which was definitely a benefit. So that's where I started learning actual music theory, and getting into composition and improvisation. But even at that point, I was still on my own in terms of the music technology, just teaching myself how to use software. And I started getting into SoundFonts, as a way to download more sounds and to eventually start making my own sounds. Because I was just relying on whatever sounds I either had in my keyboard, which was like I think an Alesis QS6, so I think it had like 8 megabytes of, ROM. So the sounds were great for the time, but pretty limited. And then having to deal with, if you want to use those with your computer, you have it connected with MIDI, and then every time you load up a project file, you've got to make sure the same instruments are loaded up. And so I gravitated towards wanting to use sounds in the box, if that makes sense, right? So sounds that are built in the computer instead of sounds from my keyboard. And then, general MIDI sounds on sound cards were still pretty bad. So I started getting into SoundFonts and, going, online, in the early days of like dial-up, going to like Hammer Sound and downloading these sound fonts that were either like somebody recorded, at home, or maybe they like ripped, from some keyboard that they owned.
Could you actually define what that is? That's a name I recognize.
Right.
But I haven't heard that in a long time.
Yeah, so SoundFonts are a very basic format for sampled instruments. They have velocity layers. There's no round robin. They have the different pitches sampled as well. You can loop the samples. You can tune them. You can do release samples with them, but it's not like a built-in feature. You would have to have a loop of silence and then have a release portion of the sample to so it's sort of a workaround. And when I started using them, not everybody could just load a sound font. I had a specific Sound Blaster sound card that could load sound font files. So I think at the time, they didn't have software that would let anybody just load sound font files until maybe a little later. I guess that explains the basis of... SoundFonts.
Was that by was it like a format by a specific company, or what was the kind of, is that like a container, or is it just a word to describe the general method?
It is a specific format. I want to say that it was Sound Blaster's format, but I can't say for certain. So maybe somebody else can, jump in.
Sure.
But but the files contained all the samples inside, so they were just like a single large SF2 SoundFont file, and they would load in your memory too. So, if you had, I forget even back then what we were talking. If we were even talking about like a gigabyte of memory, like that was. No, there's no way we even had that. That was the maximum amount of like sounds you could load, and it would take a while too. But it was way better than the sounds that you would have built into your keyboard or into my keyboard. So yeah, and then I got to the point where, I downloaded as many free sounds as I could, and, hogging the phone line and all of that, the wonders of DSL. Or not even DSL at that point. Anyway, slow internet.
Was that a big phone bill?
It wouldn't charge extra, but it was like, you could either be accessing the internet or on the phone and like available to receive phone calls, right? So as long as we were on the using the internet to download some like 2 megabyte SoundFont file, like nobody could call the home landline or anything. So it's definitely something, we would, I think I ran a couple downloads overnight too, if it was a larger, like, 10 megabyte sound. Oh, this is going to change everything. I've got to have it, and then there were a couple sounds that I bought, like SoundFonts. I'm trying to remember the name of the company. Even those, they were definitely better sounds, but they were still pretty small, no bigger than like 16 megs. But that's what led me to the point where I thought, I want to make my own sounds, I don't want to be limited to just whatever I can find for free, and so by that time I had gotten my first, bass guitar and my first like electric guitar. And so I just started recording them and recording the exact sounds that I wanted to be able to use, because, what I could play on the keyboard vastly excelled what I could actually play on the instruments. So around that time is when I started making what I released for free as like the ultimate guitar kit. It was just me kind of plunking away sounds and put that out for free. And I think it kind of developed its own following. I guess I learned this later. I had no idea at the time, but the composer who wrote the soundtrack for Undertale used the ultimate guitar kit SoundFont that I made, I guess, is part of the soundtrack to that game.
Nice.
And let everybody know, like, it's, that, what sounds he used. And so
that's nice.
I guess that gathered kind of a cult following without me even realizing it. So that was cool.
Detail.
Because I was just making sounds for myself. I had, and hoping that other people would find them useful.
Yeah. Maybe could be a future re-release by Orange Tree Samples.
Oh yeah.
Go on.
I would love to do that and try to go back to the roots of what inspired that project and what made it kind of unique, because realism wasn't necessarily a factor. Like there was definitely some limitations with the SoundFont format. So instead, I wanted to make lots of little patches that were geared for specific sounds. And so like where I could see that progressing is like you could have a funk staccato guitar sound, and it's just one sound and it's only good at one thing, but you could never achieve that same sound just with a generic, all-encompassing guitar patch. So yeah, it'd be fun to revisit that at some point.
Yeah, for sure. Did you, like, if you think back at that time, because the thing for me with samples has never really been, like, I don't hear or I don't necessarily listen things in terms of like just realism or not real. Like obviously, like talking about the time when I was looking for my first orchestral sample libraries, obviously I want to go for realism because I want to try and create music that sounds like orchestral stuff. But beyond that, like using sort of older, very like simple sampling stuff that sounds, maybe it sounds like a horn, maybe it doesn't, or listening to violin and maybe it doesn't at all like sound like a violin. But I would always listen to those sounds in terms of what they actually sounded like and what the experience was like. I was never captured by the like, oh, this is a violin. I would just listen to it the way it is and appreciate it for what it was and try and use that as it sounded like, you know. So was that something was that your experience? Maybe this was a bit poorly explained, but, you know, appreciating sounds as they actually sound like instead of what they were trying to be. Was that something you would experience back then when you were doing this early sampling, or how would you describe that sort of perspective?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I wish I had that mindset back then, because I was on the opposite side of things. You know, if I loaded in that, you know, violin patch and it sounded like a harmonica, you know, I would feel frustrated by that, and not appreciate the sounds for just the way they are. Yeah, I wish I had that maturity at that point. That's a really cool approach.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like, I couldn't maybe attribute that to maturity. It's just more like I always what I hear is what I hear. And like, especially what I love about, like, let's take some of the older like Casio synths that use like these tiny sample things. I always loved the sound of those things. But I loved them because they kind of sounded like a bit lo-fi, broken, wobbly, wonky. So I always liked them for that. And I remember seeing this clip of, I think it was Stevie Wonder, and all these music producers like praising him because he would use sounds based on what they sounded like instead of what it said on the button, because obviously he's blind to whatever extent. I don't know, is he completely blind or whatever, but I always thought like, how is that? Like, I always thought it was obvious, like you would use sound based on what it sounds like. And I think this is like something a lot of the best artists do. You know, they use these old kind of conventionally thought of like as crappy sounding pieces of gear, but they use it because it does that specific sound, and they kind of put it in that context. Like they don't try and pretend like it's something that it's not. So I definitely can't kind of attribute that to anything. Like it's just like the natural thing for me to do. But I also can imagine that it's a bit different, because if you're talking about a time when you're trying to make something sound realistic, but you can't because the technology just isn't there, or it's immensely difficult to do, I can imagine kind of it's a different perspective to approach it, instead of me being like a teenager and finding a crappy Casio synth somewhere and being like, oh, that sounds kind of funny and broken and lo-fi. But it's a different angle, because you might be actually trying to make the best sound that you can. And obviously today, someone like myself might be looking at those sounds and obviously recognizing that they're not hyper-realistic. But from my perspective, they have a very nostalgic, specific sound that maybe some of the games I loved, for example, might have. So it's also like what angle are you coming at it from?
Yeah, I think I had to get past the whole, I was so focused on realism and getting more and more realistic sounds that I didn't necessarily appreciate what those early, you know, as lo-fi as they are sounds, what those just provided on their own. Not until later, you know, especially when you know, the certain sounds from like the, you know, Alesis sounds and things like that kind of or the ad-lib sound card, have that nostalgia factor. Then later listening to them, I'd be like, those are actually pretty cool sounds. I just didn't appreciate them for what they could do at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we continue on that progression, I just wanted to lastly touch on like your parents from the perspective of like, did they encourage you to pursue music? Like, did they at some point see, okay, Greg is probably going to go for this music thing? Was there always like an environment or atmosphere of encouragement in terms of doing music? Or how did they, see the possible path that you were going to walk down?
Yeah, they were definitely very, very encouraging. I think that's, one aspect of their parenting that they did very well is they always would encourage us to pursue our interests, and support as much as they could. Obviously, music can get pretty expensive, with instruments, and then you factor in, computer tech and stuff like that. But they did their best, and they did their best to try to, take me to see live music too, because, being classical musicians, they appreciate that, hey, in order to understand what makes something sound realistic, you need to develop that sense for what makes like an orchestra sound real. And so you need to hear real orchestra and hear, real bands play. So they did that as much as they could, to, take me to see live music. Very supportive, even through, getting a degree in music at, a university. Like, I don't think once they asked me, hey, what's the game plan? How are you going to turn this into a job later on? They just said, hey, well, this is what you're interested in doing. We'll be there to support you. So.
Yeah. Cool. So going from that sampling that you did, what was the next step?
Yeah. So at that point I think I was like 17. And at that point, so I'd released some free sounds, and I was just starting university, and I definitely had on my mind, I was like, okay, I need to kind of figure out how to translate this into like a job later on. And I got approached by a company called Manytone Music. They had seen the free sounds that I was putting out there, and they said, hey, have you thought about like charging something, for sampling stuff? And so I started working with them like as an independent contractor, and I would sample the instruments. And then the guy who owned the company, Paul Brown, pretty much taught me how to properly sample instruments. And so like how to properly, chop the tack and do a little fade at the end, and how to tune them like manually. He'd have me put on like a sine wave, not use any sort of like tuner, but put a sine wave on and then like match the tuning until you hear the beat frequency disappear, so every single sample. And he swore by that technique. And so, so I learned a lot of the approach from him. We put out a bunch of sounds through the Manytone brand name. I did more electric bass sounds, and then eventually put out Many Bass, which was like a full bass plugin with those sounds. I think I did like a fretless bass, upright bass, and I think I did some guitar sounds. And he recorded his own stuff too. So that was a really good like just learning environment too, as well as, to kind of start bringing in, a little bit of income. So eventually, maybe I'm getting ahead too much, but that's what eventually led me to the point where I was like, okay, this is cool. This is one area where I can, that's potentially a job. And so, what would happen if I took once I graduated, what would happen if I took all my energy and just kind of focused it on sample libraries?
Yeah. So were you working there before you were even 18? Or
That sounds like a legal question.
no,
Wait a second,
I'm
I'm
just
getting busted.
well,
I
you
think,
were how
think
should
I
I
was
phrase
17. I think I was 17 when I started. Because I
talking
was
with
young for
them?
my age going into. My birthday's in September, so I'm like, on the for going into college, I would be on the younger side of my peers. So I think I was 17 at the time, and I remember early on, he was like, "Okay, well, you're bringing in this much royalties," and there were times when I would tell him, "Hey, I need like a new audio interface," and so he'd just buy me something, and have it shipped to me. So that was cool, especially since I was living with my parents at the time. Didn't have like credit cards and stuff like that. Yeah, and he's in Canada, by the way. So we were just kind of working remotely. He'd call and we'd talk about what the next thing is and how to do stuff. And but I was 17. I was probably just a few months away from being 18 at the time.
Yeah. What year was this? Just to get an idea of like what the technology was roughly like around
that
that
would
time.
be 2004 was when I started university.
Yeah. So very, very, very early days in like digital tech still, I would estimate.
Yeah, I didn't even get into like Giga Sampler, that whole format.
Yeah.
That was just, I think, was just beyond my price range. To get into Giga Studio and stuff. So I never used it, and I never developed any sounds for it. It was with SoundFonts, and then with Manytone, they had their own format that was, or it was licensed from Woozix Sound, which is pretty much, it had all the same capabilities as SoundFonts.
Yeah. So is this where university came into the picture?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I pretty much was just making sounds kind of on the side at that point and focusing on, I was a jazz performance major. And so.
Okay. Which instrument?
On
or
piano.
Was that piano?
Yeah. So that was a majority of that was on piano. I did take one or two classes on bass, sort of towards the end, when I had more free time. But yeah, majority of it was on piano. And I guess by the time I graduated, I kind of realized that the only way forward with having a music degree was in teaching. And I wasn't super interested into going into teaching because I wanted to write music for games and film and TV, So I wish I had that clarity before I started, because that probably would have better informed where I went to university. They had a recording studio there, and they had Pro Tools and Digital Performer and some like ADAT machines and stuff. So they had some tech, but they didn't really have any teachers like teaching classes on like how to, recording music for TV and stuff like that. By the time I graduated, I didn't really want to go into teaching, and I wasn't really sure how to get in the whole composition, for TV and film. It felt like I had to maybe move to LA just for the physical proximity, because so much depends on who you know in your daily life and being able to meet people in person. But instead of moving, I was like, well, I am making some money recording these sounds for Manytone, and it was bringing in, I was on a royalty basis. So it was bringing in, I don't know how much, but maybe a couple $100 a month. And so, that's when I thought, hey, what if I focus completely on that, made my own sounds, and I wanted to again, with the pursuit of realism, I started messing around with like synth edit and trying to rig together stuff to get, round robin and maybe like some sort of very primitive like string, fret detection, for guitars. And so I wanted to do stuff that I couldn't do in many tones format. And that's another thing that kind of prompted me to go out on my own and start my own company.
And did you start a company already at that point, or?
Yeah, so that's when I kind of formally was like, okay, I don't think I told Manytone, see ya, I'm doing my own thing, because I still sold products through them, but started my own company. And that's when I think kind of another thing that prompted it was with getting Kontakt 2. That was the version at the time, was Kontakt 2, and just being overwhelmed by the possibilities, the scripting language that it had. And I think at that time, I'm not sure if the Scrappy basses were out at the time or if that happened shortly afterward. But seeing some of those early Kontakt instruments that were doing way more than what you could do with SoundFonts, I was just, blown away. And that seemed like, okay, I need to start my own business, start, making my own sounds and just explore what the possibilities are, with this scripting language that can empower the samples. So I started Orange Tree Samples in, 2008. I think it was August 13th. And it was literally like, right after the summer after I graduated. And it was just me. So I would, plug in my bass and just start recording. And I could have a finished instrument, within a couple weeks, just working all day on it. And that was the birth of the very first instruments I started selling, which were Core-Bass Cherry. And then I think I made some expansions for it, like a picked version and another version that was slap bass. And by then I had invested a lot more time into my own practicing the instrument and playing with bands and stuff like that and gigging. So, when it came to stuff like recording picked bass and slap bass and the technique required, I was pretty comfortable with, playing bass.
And how did you get the word around in terms of, hey, people, I have some sample libraries now. Like, what was the process like there?
Oh man, it was scrappy. I still feel like it's kind of scrappy, today. But posting on forums and just being like, hey, here's something that I'm working on, and post an audio clip or something like that, like very informal, I mean, I knew nothing about marketing and so that whole thing was just a ongoing learning process. So yeah, posting on, audio clips on forums. And I think the big ones at the time, there was KVR Audio. I mean, it's still around, of course. But then what was the other big one called? I feel like not Sound, Northern Sounds. Do you remember that forum?
I don't remember that. I know, well, obviously Gear Slots back when it was Gear Slots. KVR, what else? There's like a third.
I don't know if VI Control was around at that time, or maybe it was in its infancy.
Yeah, probably not. I have the impression that it's a bit newer, but I was never super familiar with the forum space. Usually I would go, like if I had an issue with a specific piece of tech, I would make an account and go there. But I was never one to like spend a lot of time there. But yeah, I guess if I was more technically minded back then, like I would go there. But I think it's super cool that there are people who care deeply about the things and want to log in every day and, go help people and answer. I think it's, I love those kind of community niches or niches. I don't know how you pronounce it, but I think niche.
Yep.
Yeah, I love those kind of places. So, Yeah.
Yeah. I think with Northern Sounds, from what I remember, I'm not sure if that was bigger than KVR. It was definitely more specific, but they were very particular about anything referencing commercial products. They had to be a paying advertiser. And, in retrospect, it wasn't like super expensive to advertise with them, but, I'm scrappy, I can't, like $200, $300, like that's, pretty serious investment, so I would post audio clips and I wouldn't mention what it is. I would just, be very vague about, hey, here's, a sample library I'm working on, you can listen to it here. And then, people would reply to it. And then I would send them a private message and be like, hey, if you're interested, this is what it's called and here's a link, And I think nowadays, if you took that approach, like that would come across as being really annoying, but that's what kind of helped me build up my initial, audience of people who were interested in what I was doing. And I guess it had to be a little bit like subversive, at least on Northern Sounds, to kind of get around their moderation policies in that way. But I was also, at that point in August, I was still 20. I was a month away from being 21, so I still had a lot to learn.
Yeah, and it's like, that kind of reminds me of some of the Reddit forums that are out, because I remember at some point I would, like when I released some of my first like some of the first albums I did, I would, post those on some pages that I thought were relevant. And I was never actually like Reddit is super like territorial, and it depends a lot on the specific, what do you call them? Reddit
subreddits.
Threads? Subreddits. Yeah. Thank you. So some of them are like super nice. Some of them are not so very nice, at least by my standards. But a lot of like, some of them are very like territorial, and you have to go by certain rules, and they think any sort of like self-promotion is a big no-no. And I understand that in some contexts, depending on how you do it. But I was always like super transparent about it. I was never pushing anything. I just like, this is what I did. It's kind of this in that style, and it was never like I wasn't trying to sell anything or. And I always followed the rules, but sometimes it turns out there are rules beyond the ones mentioned, and I was like, oh, anyway. Some of them were really nice subreddits, but some no. But again, it depends on like you said, you have to understand the culture of the, market or the subculture that you're going into, especially in places like Reddit where it can be very specific. Let's put it in a nice way, how they want to have their business run.
Yeah. For the longest time, they had, at least in the main subreddits, pretty strict, like no self-promotion policies, which is, I understand why, but it's a pity, because some of the coolest stuff that I found, or even like bands and musicians, are, from something that I saw on Reddit, way back. So it's a pity. And then people got wise to the whole, oh, it's not me, this is a friend, a friend who, But I have to quickly rewind just real quick. I said that I was 20 and I wasn't 21 yet, and that my math doesn't line up, because I had gone through university at that time. So 2008, I was 21 turning 22. So just in case anybody is like doing the math and wait a second, things aren't lining up.
That's I'm sure I have one hyper autistic listener who even more than I am.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I still had a lot to learn, so the point remains.
They're going to email you, Greg.
Right.
I counted the years, and you're
big
a liar.
Fat phony.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a good point what you say about the self promotion. I mean, I guess again, like I'm completely fine with spaces defining their own rules, and I get the point. But again, I think it should probably be more about how you do it, because there are ways in, like, let's take your industry, for example, which is a good example of it's like completely normal for developers to go on like forum, like Gearslots, whatever it's called these days, and other places, and there are obviously threads or places where you can do that, but it's like, hey, I'm this developer, I did this thing, you can check these out if you want, and I would love to hear feedback. And I remember, I think, to me, like Stephen Slate comes to mind, for example, because that was kind of the time when I was, for whatever reason, his stuff was, in my radar, and I would, see him go to Gearslots or something similar, and then just post stuff there. And I see developers do that, sample library developers do that today, and it's like people want to hear about it. They think it's cool, and they get to talk with the dev themselves and discuss it. And I think that's a nice example of obviously being in the right place and having the right way of communicating your stuff, and having it be completely organic and normal, and nobody's like, don't self-promote your stuff, and you're a part of the community, obviously, there, and that's how people welcome it. But I personally think it's amazing to get stuff from the source, like from the person, and then I can ask them questions, and instead of getting some kind of marketing trick, something like that.
Yeah, that's the tough part. Like, especially starting out, it's like you want to come across as being professional, and you want to sound like a bigger company than you are, right? Especially when you're just one person. But that can work against you. I mean, there's pros and cons. But yeah, sometimes people lose that kind of the humanity of that, if that makes sense. That personal element where it's like, no, the developer is just a person. You can post on the forum, and ideally they will be able to interact and respond. But yeah, I mean, on the other hand, if you're unprofessional about it, like, I mean, that can be bad too. There's a balance. Yeah.
And I think like these days, maybe being the lone, approachable, normal developer is, I would say, like from my perspective, kind of works in your favor more. Because there are a lot of, like, one of the things that happens is when a company grows and gets bigger, it kind of loses its vision and the whole direction, and then it becomes this ambiguous blob. And some of the companies, I won't name anyone's, but I'm sure people will think of some of them themselves, that kind of, they take branding super, super seriously, and they want to kind of, again, keep this kind of allure or perception alive that it isn't really reality, but they do that, anyway. But I think being the lone developer who people can, get to know through their social media and through their work, they kind of like appreciate that, and in my experience, they're eager to support those people as well. But obviously the work needs to be good as well. But at least my experience with a lot of the smaller sample library developers that I work with is that people, appreciate them, and, want to hear it from the source. And sometimes some of these people are not at all good communicators or marketers, and they don't need to be. They just make a great product, and they share it in their own voice, and then people can make a judgment about whether it serves them or not. But I think today that's a lot more of a positive image to have, rather than being the blob company that maybe had a vision 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, but now is just this machine that produces stuff sort of semi-randomly and without maybe direction.
Right. Yeah, I was never very interested in like the whole entrepreneur, like doing that side of things. I mean, there's a lot of difficult work related to developing sample libraries, and it can be pretty tedious, whether that's recording the actual samples or editing them, which can take a lot longer. But there's enough that I really enjoy that I would much rather like be in the trenches, actually working directly on the sample libraries than just like hiring people to do all the work for me and be the CEO or whatever. And not that there's anything wrong with going that direction. It just never was very interesting to me. And then, like you said, it allows you to pursue your own vision, and experiment. You can sometimes be a little bit more agile in terms of the different projects that you take on.
Yeah, and you want to be a part of the art of making the thing. That's your craft, and that's your vision, and you want to see it come to life.
Yeah,
you don't just want to hand it off to someone else.
And I think, whenever you're in a situation where it's like, I'm interested in doing this project, but I need to talk to the shareholders first. It's like you've just maybe lost it at that point. But it was also, I think in some respects, the way that I have my business set up is probably not like, from an objective point of view, somebody be like, that's, if you wanted to start a business today, you shouldn't have set it up that way. So to be more specific about what I'm talking about, I always felt very strongly that everybody involved in developing a virtual instrument, be that the musicians or engineer, they should not only get paid, but they should be involved in the, receiving royalties from the sales, especially since, in the case of a lot of the libraries that we release, guitars and like, folk instruments like banjos and mandolins, like, one of the guys that I work with who records those instruments, he also works as a session musician. And so I would hate for him to be in a situation where he essentially has to compete against himself, right? Because somebody makes a decision whether they hire him or just buy a sample library. And so I always felt strongly that, they should just receive, every time a copy is sold, they get paid for it as well. And and the engineer too. So that's something, I think there was maybe one or two cases where like an engineer very specifically said, no, I don't want any royalties, just, you can just pay me up front, which, I usually put in some sort of upfront, payment and cover costs for studio time and stuff anyway. But for the most part, they're all making, it's like 50-50 with whoever I'm working with, And so from an objective point of view, if this like an investor, somebody like looking to buy your business, they'd be like, well, that's ridiculous. That's not a viable, investable business or anything. But for me, it's like, I feel like that's a more ethical approach, for the line of work that I do. And then, as a result, I end up working with a lot of people who, are really eager to work on more projects. And so as a result, I've got like, it's got to be still over like 30 different instruments all already recorded and lined up for development. And so they're always like really happy to, work on more sample libraries.
Yeah. Well, it's everybody chooses their priorities. And if your priority was to maximize the business in terms of if you define it as the output of, financial output, financial gain, and profit, then you would do things differently. But to me, it sounds like you're coming from a place of like art first, then moral, ethical principles, and then you figure out a way to monetize it. And then you figure out a way to put like a business wrapper around it. And yeah, that's something I relate to very much, and I'm sure a lot of people do. And I think this is because unfortunately right now we're living through a time when a lot of people think capitalism is an issue and that's the problem, when in reality there's nothing built into capitalism that says you need to maximize, for only profits and nothing else. I mean, that's a decision that a bunch of people make in a company. And you could say that certain incentives directed towards the profit angle, but you as a business owner, for example, have complete, liberty and choice to optimize for other things as well. So, and it is the case that unfortunately a lot of business people do only care about money. And I think that is a tremendous flaw. And I think that speaks to a person who is, maybe some aspects in you are maybe underdeveloped, and maybe you could look at some other things that your business could increase other than profits. But I think there's a lot of nuance there, and there's nothing stopping people from running great companies that maximize for, things like your collaborators, like how fulfilling is it to them, how happy are they in relation to working with you. And it's also pretty important how you feel like, what you feel like once you, leave work for the day. And it's like, what did I optimize for? What did I maximize for? So, I mean, there's nothing stopping people from doing things in a way that you are doing, for example. And I hope more people are going to get into business and do things their way, in a way that reflects their morals and values.
Yeah. I mean, especially now that, we have, AI products entering the specific like virtual instrument scene, where there's that potential to, run your violin track through AI and get, something generated back. I mean, I think there's a lot of promise, and it's sort of like coming from that like having the ethics of it be such a priority for myself, as you mentioned. Like, that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind too, is like, well, I hope whoever, recorded the, all the audio for that data set is, part of the ongoing, profit that business might make.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that's something that will go towards, because obviously the models are educated on information, and there's a lot of intellectual and other properties perhaps in there. And I think people should be able to like get, for example, royalties off of the profits that are made as a result of, someone using their work. And if it's being used, I mean, this is a very complex conversation, but that just makes sense to me. But again, obviously, that by its nature, that's not going to optimize for financial, profit, because obviously, if you have to pay, that royalty to somebody, that's going to make the numbers go down. But again, it's going to maximize and optimize for someone else's benefit as well, which to me is like a no-brainer thing. But then again, I'm not, optimizing for just money.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure. I felt like I was going to say something about that, but
no worries.
That's a good point. I think you have to be very intentional about what you focus on optimizing. And as an artist, I mean, it's important that you're compensated, but if that's all that you focus on, I think it's pretty easy to kind of lose that original, vision and what interested you in your line of work in the first place. And it can also lead to like, Well, if everything's about maximizing profit, then suddenly you start running into situations where the product itself gets cheapened in order to maximize that, and that's never good for the consumer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're seeing plenty of that right now in the world. But I do hope that it's like an unsustainable business model. And I think a lot of people are getting sick and tired of the, optimizing for those sort of things. People want more longevity it depends on what the product is, but there are other.
The cool thing I will say really quickly is that the virtual instrument and sample library, that industry has a pretty low barrier to entry, probably even nowadays with products like Kontakt and Halion and samplers like that, where you do have these big players in the industry who are, making these, huge and vastly expensive to create orchestral libraries. But then at the same time, you have people, recording, solo cello and violin and stuff like that, just in their home, and they can make competitive products, so that aspect of it is really cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah. And to be clear, I love the technology from the perspective, like it lowers the barrier of entry and makes more things possible. But it ultimately, it's up to us how to uphold the morals and the ethics. Like it's up to us. There's nobody else gonna do that decision or that extra work. So, yeah. Well, I mean, I sort of want to try and wrap up at least the Orange Tree Samples trajectory story. So, how did it go in the beginning? Like, were you able to increase your income quite rapidly, or just a little bit? And how did you solve that situation if it didn't cover everything that you needed to pay for?
Yeah. So starting out, I was sampling everything myself. So I wasn't really, there wasn't anybody to pay royalties to. And my cost of living was so low at that time too. It was, just a single guy, right? And I wasn't like, and also just the cost of doing business was pretty low too. I wasn't licensing the Kontakt player at the time, so it was for the full edition only. And that definitely had its own limitations, but it just meant that there wasn't that huge cost associated with starting out. There wasn't much cost at all. I mean, like just running a website, and then a lot of the costs were on the other side of things, like payment processing fees and things like that. So that made it pretty easy, and people started buying the libraries pretty quickly, which I can only attribute to word of mouth at that point. I wasn't doing any kind of paid advertising. It was just forums, trying to encourage people to do the word of mouth, talking on the forums. And so that was really helpful.
So could you actually pay for your life sort of pretty much off the bat going into it?
Yeah. I mean, I had some money saved up from like, playing at gigs and stuff, but I also kind of saw that as a dead end for myself in terms of like, long-term paying for bills and stuff. I knew other people who tried to play live music for a living, and it's just, you have to teach and do so many other things at the same time. You can't rely on it as your sole source of income. And so I was already sort of like, getting away from playing gigs and stuff. But I did have some money saved up from that. And then, as the sample libraries were selling, it was easy to support myself back then. I had a roommate, and my rent was like super low. And then, there weren't that many costs associated with, living. I didn't even have like health insurance. I didn't need health insurance at the time. It was just, whatever, we'll figure that out sometime later. but yeah, I mean, it definitely helped that, once, sales started coming in and, then I was able to develop more products and then put more money into developing the products, started to be able to pay people to edit, to help with the sample editing and to develop tools for editing the samples. That really helped. And then, eventually, being able to be at a place in life where I felt comfortable to, get married, and that, we could support a family, I always, and even to this day, just feel super grateful to everybody who supported Orange Tree Samples back then from the beginning. And then even nowadays, it just, feels like, like I said before, there are aspects to developing sample libraries that are very tedious and not fun at all, but there's so much other stuff that's rewarding. I feel like I get to pursue something that I love doing, and people support that. I feel very, very honored and thankful for that.
Yeah. Was there a breakthrough release that kind of changed things significantly? Was there a release or a moment where you went okay, we've gone to a next level here?
I think there were probably a couple. I would say Evolution Strawberry, the first serious guitar library, that was somewhat of a breakthrough. Even though that didn't license the Kontakt player at the time. And now it does, obviously. So that's undergone some iteration and development. That was a pretty notable breakthrough. And then also, I think when I released Evolution Dracus, which is that 8-string metal guitar, I want to say it 2015. That was our first licenses the Kontakt player instrument. That was another. I would say that took it to the next level too. Much larger, being able to access that larger market of people who didn't need to own the full edition of Kontakt, which is, still pretty expensive. It's an expensive investment, even being sort of what I would call the industry standard sampler. So that just meant that everybody, whether or not they owned Kontakt, could use the library. So that was another breakthrough. Beyond that, I don't know. I will say we just released Latitude Latin Rock Percussion. A month or two? Man, it feels unreal.
Something like that.
I've worked on that project for so many years. It still feels...
Yeah, you said did you say over 10 years? Or...
Yeah, over 10 years. I think in the website I say 10 years, but the truth is we started... with the sample specifications and the recording sessions. The
year was 1876.
Yeah, pretty much. So for probably about 11 years. I do not recommend working on a project for that long. That it was just going through phases of burnout, and then when something isn't good enough, you got to go back and you got to do it right, And so going through that stuff too, it took so much work. But anyway, so that I would say that was kind of a breakthrough for us as well. Even though it hasn't been out for that long, it's our first percussion library. Beyond doing a couple drum freebies, here and there, it's our first commercial percussion product. So I was pretty relieved, because you don't know what you're getting into, right? It's is anybody going to be interested? It's definitely a crowded market too. There's a lot of drum libraries out there.
Yeah. And I was very excited to see you go into drums, because, I consider the guitar stuff especially to be... It's still the best that I know of in terms of realism and playability and inspiration, all sort of, summed into a product. So I was I can't wait to see this in action in the percussion. Because I would imagine that maybe sampling percussion is easier, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. And maybe relating to that, could you give some reasons as to why it took so long to complete?
Yeah, I mean, I think having so much content just acted like a multiplier, for everything taking longer. Sorting through all of the audio sessions, and we're dealing with a lot of things that don't necessarily have a standard for like how they should be mapped or what articulations to record. Like on guitar, it's a lot more. It's a lot easier, in terms of like open sustains, different degrees of palm muting, natural harmonics, artificial harmonics, tapping, slapping and popping, and especially if you're on, bass. So it's a lot more standardized, it's especially by now. But with percussion, we're also dealing with a lot of Brazilian percussion, and so there's some like translation, for like, okay, well, what is this articulation really called?
Nobody knows.
Yeah, are they muted and unmuted, or are they closed and open? For like closed and open tone or slap. So there was a lot more research had to go into that. Yeah, and I was very thankful to work with like the other producer on the project, Chris Paler, has a lot of experience with that, and just being in the music, the industry for so long. And then the percussionist, is pretty well versed at all of those instruments and has played with a lot of, big notable Latin music players and stuff, as well as being a teacher. And so I was able to kind of rely on them whenever I had questions about articulations or what was important to sample. I absolutely could not have done it without their help. Yeah, what else was difficult about it? Yeah, I mean, you're right. There are aspects about recording percussion that are easier. A lot of the hits are louder, so you have less like noise floor to deal with. The hardest thing is just like anything long, like cymbals, where you have that, they can decay forever, right? And so your signal to noise ratio just goes up and up, and it takes a long time to sample too. So that was more difficult. All the scripting and just trying to figure out a way to organize the interface in a way that had all the features we wanted in it, but wasn't like looking at like an airplane cockpit, with a number of controls and knobs and switches and stuff. Like getting that balance was tricky. I think I redid the interface about 3 times, like completely scrapped the design and said, I'm starting over. Like this direction just doesn't feel right. I mean, I have a whole like binder full of sketches and stuff that just didn't end up getting used. And even then, there's elements to it that probably if I were to redesign it again, I'd be like, oh, could this be organized differently or in a way that's maybe less complex? So, yeah, that was really tricky. Yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say that I was very, like, once I saw the scope of what's in there, and like I said in my review, like, yeah, it says Latin on the box, but obviously it caters to so much more. And once, like when I saw all the individual instruments in there, I was like, this is like, it's extremely comprehensive. Very like it's a huge toolkit. Like if you're looking for like a percussion library, if you need anything in that ballpark of those those sort of type of percussive instruments, it has to be in the conversation, because it is so, like, you get so much in that single piece of kit. So I can imagine, even if you manage to keep the rest of the development process sort of organized and under control, just the sheer amount of the content in there is going to just exponentially multiply the time that it takes to get it done.
Yeah, right now there's 376 instruments, and the truth is we have like maybe 40, 50 more instruments already sampled. So it's like, I mean, I didn't want to advertise that there's more stuff coming, but that is kind of in the plan to add more. I also just wanted to leave our options open, so like you said, it has that Latin rock percussion subtitle, even though it covers more than that. But part of that is because I wanted to wait and see how they would respond. Because, on one hand, some of the early beta testers were saying they would like to see it expanded to encompass more just acoustic drum pieces, like kick, actually having kick drums, because there aren't any kicks in it, and toms and more cymbals and stuff. So there's that direction, but then there's also like, we have djembes in there, but we don't really comprehensively cover like African percussion. There's a whole ton of more, stuff that we could do there, not to mention Middle Eastern and Asian percussion. So I'm kind of waiting to see, what direction people would like to see. And even within like Latin percussion, there was a lot of stuff that I was like, how could we have missed that? Like trying to think of some of there's some variations on kind of conga-like instruments, and was like a heko. We never sampled one of those. They're kind of like a metal guiro with springs on it that you scrape like a guiro. For whatever reason, it's not in the collection. So yeah, we've got to add one at some point.
Yeah, I was actually very, very impressed and excited and surprised about some of the normal like drum kit stuff in there, because I was like, there was no, like, I would have thought there was no demand of that being included in there, and I was like, wow, this is like another complete, like you open a door in a house that you see a room that you didn't know existed in there. Yeah, and I really liked those a lot. So I would love to see you make a drum kit library as well, like maybe in a similar fashion that you've done your guitars. Like take a specific style and do that, because your drums had like this. Like I said in the review, the sounds have, in general, in that library, have they're sort of simultaneously like organic and natural and raw in a good way, but they are very mature and polished. They're not like sort of raw and unfinished, but they're natural and mature, I would say. Like polished is maybe the word. But they sit in a very nice place where if you want to do more processing on them, you can easily. Like with samples, you can hear if they have, like I talk about air a lot. And if you can hear that the sample is breathing, then you know that it has space for things like compression and EQ. They sound like they are going to be very malleable to those kind of things. But on the other hand, you won't have to do very drastic things to make it, hit harder. So, I like them. And some of the cymbals were like extremely soft and puffy, which is again because cymbals easily get very harsh and space taking. So whenever I hear cymbals that are sort of soft and mellow and they can sort of sit in the back, I always like that, because you can always make them more pronounced if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, I can only attribute that to like all the work and experience from the engineer on the project, Mike Arvold, and then Chris did all the like selection of percussion instruments. So those are probably the Tony Williams cymbals. Just have a really nice sound to them naturally. But yeah, one thing that the engineer told me once that really stuck with me is, because we've got a room signal as well as a close signal. So if you want more of that close proximity effect, you can use the close signal. But the room signal, the way he explained it was that his goal is to impart the feeling of distance to the sound without it sounding roomy and like you're suddenly adding the sound of a hall or a large room, because you can always add that with impulses or whatever, but it's harder to emulate just that physical distance from the instrument. So by mixing those two, you can kind of get a balance of both depending on what you're after.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a well-recorded space sound is still always going to be a lot better than what a reverb is going to do, because there is like a three-dimensional, presuming it's captured properly, there's like a three-dimensional thing about it, and then a reverb can work as a sort of a nice glue in the mix sense, but it's not trying to create like the impression of the space. So yeah, super important. And I'm actually happy to see that. I think developers are getting better at that, because it used to be the case that the rooms are like way too washy or like kind of garbled in a way. So it's very difficult to find. First of all, like there's an instrument it's always going to work in a specific way in that space. So to find an instrument that sings with the space, like the space becomes a part of the instrument. Like it's something about how obviously you're going to tune the instrument, and depends on what the instrument is in this case. But you have to find a way where I'm sure there's a mathematical way of explaining this, but it's something to do with how the sound waves travel in some sort of a symmetry, in a way that arrives at the microphone in a way that is like breathing naturally and like sort of in sync with the space and the instrument.
Yeah.
You can really feel that. It's a huge difference.
Right.
Compared to the kind of garbled random space mics that are just plonked down, and it's kind of like very mushy the way it sounds like.
I mean that I feel like that can only come from just the years and years of experience engineers have with just moving the mic around and moving their head around, physically, just to see, where the sweet spots are. And once they have that sense, and they know what to listen for. I don't know if there's any, or if there are any books that have that information in it. It seems like one of those things that they can only just say, hey, here are some techniques, here's what to look for, and then just you've got to learn it on your own through experience. Yeah,
I have a tremendous respect to good recording engineers, because you can have the same song, and even if it's played by the same people, if you just kind of let somebody record it versus a master recording engineer, it's just going to be a completely different story. It truly is an art, and like you said, it takes a lot of experience. You got to know your tools, and you got to know the spaces that you're in, and but it's very nice once you find the right pairing of the right engineer with the right tools in the right space. It's really nice.
Yeah.
Briefly, because we're already past the 3-hour mark, I want to be respectful of your time, and I'm sure you have other things to
that's fine.
to get to. We briefly touched on, or you touched on, what you already. All the libraries you have with Orange Tree samples. Is there anything about the future of what you're up to, or what you're going to do, that you want to sort of publicly talk about or touch on? Anything that's sort of in the horizon?
Yeah, it's always hard talking about future plans, because then you set kind of like a timeline. You start getting people, hey, how's that project coming along? But
and it's like what you said earlier, I think is actually very wise about not promising too much or anything. But as long as you're long as you're comfortable, mentioning
Yeah,
or
I mean,
whatever. It doesn't need to be a specific project. It could be anything like philosophy or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that
Whatever
makes
you
sense.
want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, our evolution-based libraries. I mean, I've already kind of mentioned this before, actually, for years, that it's just the percussion library's been taking up all the bandwidth. The engine has started to show its age, obviously, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to be improved and modernized. I mean, I think you still get a lot of value out of the sounds themselves, but there's stuff with the workflow and the interface that's like, that was okay for back then, but needs to be improved. So that's definitely a priority, especially with guitars being, such a mainstay for us. And then
that's actually something I did want to touch on. I was maybe hoping that it would come up through this question, which is because I've noticed there, like, maybe this has something to do with the native instruments stuff of, who knows what the future is going to be like. And maybe partially it has something to do with software changing with AI, the coding expenses coming down. And but what I see now is a lot of developers going into their own bespoke engines, building their own engines. You don't have to touch on anything in terms of Orange Tree samples regarding that, unless you want to. But do you have sort of any thoughts on that phenomenon happening, and what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's something that it's definitely been on my radar to consider doing our own engine. It's something that has to be done right, though, because I've seen some developers do their own engine and they, it works smoothly. There's not a lot of bugs out the gate. But in the cases where it isn't, it's definitely seen as a negative, where you see people saying, why don't they just develop this for Kontakt or an established platform instead of insisting on doing their own? So it's just like an installer. It's like you've got to make sure that it works solidly from the get-go. And so that's, I would say, the biggest thing that I'm wary of is, like, if we did our own sampler, like, it would also have to justify people using a bespoke sampler. Right, so maybe it has some features that Kontakt just can't do, but so I'm open to it. We'll see.
Yeah. Was there, before I interrupted you, was there something else you wanted to touch on in terms of the future of what you have going on?
There's definitely stuff with, like, R&D, research and development, like looking at the actual approach for how we sample instruments. Because so far, when it comes to, like, all of our basses and guitars and folk instruments, we just kind of use the same specification for, like, how to sample those. But I would like to go back and say, especially now that we're getting a lot more into pre-roll, or like the sound that happens before that main transient. What sort of technology can we do around that helps improve the realism, or more contextual samples, or, like, even legato samples themselves? The transitions almost have several parts to them. And should those actually be separate samples instead of just one single legato transition sample? Because especially in guitar and bass, sometimes there's a little buzz that happens as your finger, lifts off the string or, depresses the string. So there's stuff like that I would love to set aside time and just go back and say, hey, I'm sure there's sounds and details that we're missing, and how can we add those to improve the believability and authenticity?
Yeah, that's very interesting. It kind of reminds me, do you know Jasper Blanc from Performance Samples?
Only by name. I don't think I've spoken with him. But.
Yeah, maybe there's something there, especially talking about legato.
Yeah,
because I know he's done something that he calls sympathetic resonance legato. I'm sure it. I mean, I don't actually know what it is. I don't remember. I don't know how much he has talked about it, but I would get the impression that it has something to do with the actual going from note to note and the way the notes resonate with one another, but sampling sort of the I don't know how to explain this. This is very silly of me explaining something I don't know what it is and trying to poorly explain what I don't know what it is. But yeah, something to do with from what I gathered is, you know, the different relationships between different intervals, and probably I don't know if they have something to do with the overlapping between, because obviously if you're playing an instrument, it's not always just going to be like two notes resonating with one another, but it's going to be a selection of other things as well going on there. But I don't know, like maybe if you want to talk with him about some of that stuff, maybe there's something.
What that might relate to is when you have a legato transition, you know, so you're going from one note to another, and that transition is sampled. On its own, it might sound fine, but when you introduce another legato transition, so you're playing, you know, 3 notes total. I hope I'm explaining this in the simplest way.
Yeah.
You run into a situation where you have 2 legato transitions happening right after each other, and the second one cuts off the first one. And that's why I think so many developers have started sampling fast transitions as well as slow ones. So if you start playing like a faster run, it'll switch over, because those longer transitions just they don't translate. They get cut off, and yeah, it's just you lose the realism. So I imagine, you know, maybe that's a solution that he's come upon for that problem. I forget. I think I remember running into that with some of the Cinesample stuff, but I forget what solution we used, or if we used a solution for that. I definitely am aware of that problem. I know performance sample stuff is like super cool, and they sound great. And I love their mission of just like, you know, even just the interface of being like kind of bare bones, you know, will get you great sounds, not a ton of configuration necessary, and more specific sounds that are designed to excel for specific things. So that's all cool. I know one of the problems we ran into, sort of resonance oriented with Cinebrass, was if you have the mod wheel all the way up, and so you're playing very loud sustains and you quickly bring it down, it has this weird, unnatural sound to it, because the brass from that loud sound doesn't ring out like it should. And so I think I leveraged like release samples or something silly like that in the background to kind of help, you know, bridge that transition in dynamics. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff happening under the hood to solve issues like that, as I'm sure, you know, with other developers I've run into as well.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I think Jasper is somewhere on the West Coast as well. Maybe like Oregon, California. I'm not sure. Somewhere there. But
I'll need to do some research.
Yeah. Send him a message and see what you can nerd out on.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Yeah. One of the things that caught my ear earlier when you were talking about when you were studying, that you wish you knew a bit more or had some kind of wisdom guiding you in terms of going into film music or video game music. Is that an avenue that you ended up exploring, or is it something that you would still want to explore? And especially from the perspective of like, what piece of advice would you wish you heard back then in terms of being able to, you know, pursue that direction?
I think the advice I wish I had back then was just understanding that there are a lot of great composers out there, you know, who have great gear, who can write great music, and if you're just trying to do things online and try to line up gigs, you're kind of competing with all of those. It's sort of like the equivalent that I can think of in like guitar land is there's always somebody who can play faster than you, right? Who are younger than you, who can just shred and like, so there's always somebody who can write amazing sounding music, but a lot of it seems more like your relationship with maybe the director in the case of like, film and what they want out of the music, or how you work with the if you're working on like a game, what their vision is for the music, rather than just saying, oh great, I've been hired to do this project, I get to do whatever I want. But to show, especially in film, like show restraint, where like sometimes it's more effective to not score a scene, right? Like not every second has to have music behind it. So, and not everything has to be musically complex. Like you don't have to show everybody the extent of your musical knowledge at every second, like some of the most effective music might be very, simple melodies and triads, and it's some of the most emotive, stuff out there. So learning that the relationships with people on the team is very important, maybe even more important than your musical abilities. But then also just developing that sense for how to get the most value out of every note, right? So I wish those were two, skills that were emphasized more, if not, taught.
Yeah. Well, that's the ego side and the intellectual side. And because, I remember being in a band sort of, growing up and, in those sort of maybe, 15, 16, 17, 18, around those years, I would always I would work with really great musicians. And I was by far the worst in the band. I was singing and, a great drummer, great guitar player, and they would have really great ideas. And then at some point the song becomes kind of boring and familiar to you. And then you want to do like a slight twist and you think, oh, this riff is a bit too simple, and it's like, oh, that's too obvious. And even though you did the thing that worked in the beginning, like you went with the intuition and the vibe, if you will, but then you kind of you want to apply all the things that and then you kind of lose sight of the music maybe. And I've done this a million times myself. I'm not trying to, shit on anybody. But it, because, I probably I'm still that way to some extent, but I try and move away from that side of things. Probably not less ego, but sometimes you want to make things more complex out of maybe insecurity or not being sure or confident about whether something works. So, definitely simplicity is
well, I feel
beautiful.
like impressing people, especially in terms of performing music, impressing people is sort of like the bassist, no, that's not the word I'm looking for. Sort of the lowest form of like moving somebody emotionally, right? So
fundamental.
That the most basic way of emotionally moving somebody, where it's like, they'll be impressed by something. Maybe you do a drum fill that's like really impressive, and they're like, wow, that's amazing. And then you do another, and they're like, okay, that's still cool, but it loses its value, And so if all you're doing is just sort of overplaying, they'll be impressed, but I don't know. I feel like the moments that I remember that really stuck with me from like watching, bands play was not necessarily the impressive playing, but it was, sort of the trope is like the B.B. King, playing, blues guitar, where he just gets so much value out of every note. He's not doing your Eddie Van Halen, like shredding, tapping, whammy bar dives, all of that. He's getting so much value out of so few notes, and those are the moments that I remember the most, from live music. I forget.
Yeah, it's the technical capability, and even in some cases, like the intellectual capability, and even in some cases, the creative capability has nothing to do ultimately with creating a piece of music that works.
Mm-hmm.
Like those other things are tools that should facilitate you in the process of making that good piece of music. But knowing what choices to make is ultimately very difficult, because you need to have the ability to see the song and nothing else. You need to forget all of your capabilities, your skill, and just try and see the song and be in the service of that. And that's ultimately a very anti-ego, anti-intellectual process in many ways. Trying to get out of the way and do as little as possible, ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And back to what you were saying about like feeling bored sometimes while playing, I definitely resonate with that. In a way, that prompting as an artist is beneficial. It's a push to kind of like move forward and to, progress and improve. And, I think sometimes we're tempted to like show off use that opportunity to like show off technique or something, show off our chops. But at the same time, it's like, there are details to focus on that are just as impressive. So even if you're playing just a plain backbeat, and you start feeling yourself getting bored, it's like, okay, well, let's focus on like, where are you placing your snare hits? Like, are they like slightly behind the beat, slightly ahead? Like what serves the music the best? And then suddenly you're not bored anymore, right? Because you have this thing that you're focusing on just locking in and being in the pocket. And, like I said, I find those moments, more impressive. Like if I hear a drummer play and they just have that, like, so consistent, like, it's so impressive.
It's doing simple things with detail and nuance is really, really difficult. Like, how can you make so little sound so great and impressive? That's really the way that I separate amazing instrumentalists from the just good ones. I need to ask, like, in terms of your own music writing, where are you now? Like, do you write music? How often? Do you have any sort of aspirations or things you want to do in that domain?
Most of the time when I write music, it's for like demo songs, showing off sample libraries. So any of the demo songs that don't have somebody's name next to them on the website is something that I wrote. With the guitars, a lot of times that would just be like experimenting with riffs and jamming. But lately, I've been trying to get back to writing the song out on paper first. And I think that ends up, it results in a better composition overall, better song form, more imaginative chord changes and stuff like that. So, like I said earlier, though, if I wasn't busy with developing and writing demo songs and all of that stuff, I have no idea what kind of music I would gravitate towards writing.
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing what the answer to that is. Yeah.
Maybe I'd put on the Angine de Portran, like polka dots and the... I don't know if you're familiar with that band, but maybe it'd get really weird.
No. Yeah. That just brought to mind the helmet with the electrodes and gloves. And
oh, no, yeah, okay. No, that's what I would do. Okay, it's settled.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
Maybe in 2 weeks I'm going to see like a social post from you where you're just like in a vat of sorts with the electrode helmet and the gloves and,
Well, you got to have the salt water to float because you got to remove your senses,
Absolutely. Become one with the mind. Yeah. Do you have, is there any, obviously you mentioned the number of projects that you are doing with Orange Tree samples, but is there something you'd like to do but haven't done yet? without, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't want you to give away anything that will hinder your business if it's a secret. But if there is anything you'd like to, it could even be abstract if you don't want to go into any specifics.
There's definitely instruments I would like to do, if that's kind of one of the things that you're meaning by that.
Yeah, I mean, you can take that into any direction.
So whether
you want.
that's like, solo brass, solo trumpets, sax, maybe sax section, like horn section stuff. I try to also look at like gaps, where instruments, aren't quite realistic enough, or there's room for improvement. A lot of the times when it comes down to instruments like that, it comes down to the player. Finding a player who's not only technically good at their instrument and but also kind of has that mindset for sampling, where if you tell them what you're looking for, they're able to translate that into how to play it on their instrument. And then of course also have the patience for sampling, because it can be tedious, and it can cause you to play certain things that you're not used to having to do for long periods of time. So I remember when I was recording fretless bass for iconic bass Jocko, doing the vibrato samples, I was getting blisters on my fingers, and I was like, what's going on? Like I thought I was past that point in bass playing to have that happen. And I heard similar stories from some of the other instrumentalists we've worked with. So yeah, those would all be cool projects to work on. Anything that has a challenge in terms of like how the instrument itself works, and then how to translate that to something that you can play from a keyboard. I find that whole process to be really interesting. A lot of times I'll just get people emailing me saying, hey, I play such and such instrument. I'd love to make a library, check out some of my music and stuff. Those end up being, products like Passion Flute and Flute Flight, and the piano library, actually. A lot of times that was just from people emailing in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, because I've been thinking about, you get this, you find the perfect musician, you bring them into the studio. Like, do they ever, because sampling, I mean, I presume there are many ways of doing it, but I can imagine that you're a great player, but then you start sampling, and you kind of, do they ever start playing differently because of the sampling? Like, is it difficult for them to, if they're doing snippets of playing, to remember to play the way they would actually play, instead of now starting to sort of perform for the sampling process?
Yeah, totally.
So you have to do some Jedi mind tricks to help them get past that.
Or just kind of like jamming every once in a while to get back in the mindset, because you're totally right. The technique changes, whether that's guitar and the way that you're picking. If you're just picking these single notes that you're, holding out for 30 seconds, you start playing differently than you would like in context. That's something that I really admire about Miroslav Vidas, back to the old Miroslav Vidas string library. Well, definitely string library and beyond, because he sampled the entire orchestra. He would always give them context behind the samples. So he'd say, I want you to play this note, but play it like Beethoven, play it like this, song and this movement, So it wasn't just hold out this note, but give it some expression. And I think even nowadays we could, benefit from that kind of guidance.
Yeah, I actually, going back to performance samples, I think that's something from what I gathered is what he's doing as well, that he's doing sort of performance-based sampling, which is funny considering the name.
Yeah.
But from what I gathered, like he might have a passage where he's looking to sample like a specific part of that, but he gets that from in the context of what he's doing. So again, I'm sorry, Jasper, if you're listening, I'm butchering the ways in which you do things, but that's the impression I also have.
That's my impression too. Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense, and I would argue that you feel it in many cases.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, moving into the final batch of these smaller questions, you've been very gracious with your time, and
totally fine.
I apologize for running on the longer end. But yeah, I mean, I sent you a couple of questions beforehand because I want to let people meditate on them a bit more these days. I didn't used to do that, but I think it makes sense. But what is your definition of an artist?
It's funny that's a difficult question, right? Because we're artists, and there are a lot of artists around. And I think I have a broader definition too, because being an artist might not just be like being a musician, but obviously there's other fields of artwork, whether that's painting or sculpting or any of that. But sometimes when talking to people in random industries, I'll recognize that same artistic mindset, this is going to be super random and weird, but like a dentist, like talking about doing a filling. And I'm like, that's really cool. And they're interested in it. And it's like, it's an art form, So there's all sorts of other fields that, whenever your right brain kind of engages and you kind of go into that, you lose track of time, you're in that flow state. I think that's a good indicator that art is going on. But at the same time, so there's that aspect to it, but I think being an artist or being a good artist also means you have to be able to create art, without inspiration as well. So if you're feeling really uninspired, or writer's block, I definitely feel in those moments like I'm not an artist. But I think a good artist is able to either work through that and write a good sounding song anyway, or be able to kind of like, know the techniques and how to just start working, get something down on the page, and then before you know it, have that inspiration.
Yeah, it's going from kind of doing it whenever you feel like it, and going into actually becoming a professional. Because you can be an artist, but you might not be a professional artist, because a lot of what makes somebody something in terms of a skill level is how repeatable is the process and the results, and also how fast it happens. And with something as finicky as creativity, we all feel different every single day, and that's due to a multitude of factors that probably most we don't even really understand all that well. So to assume that I'm only gonna do my creative work when I feel X, Y, and Z, good luck with it, because that's only going to happen maybe a handful of days out of the year. So that's definitely a part of turning it into or becoming a professional in your craft.
I think there is something to say for, bringing this back to the beginning when we were talking about the time of day and creatives. There is something to say for working late when like you start getting physically tired and the left side of your brain kind of starts winding down, and that creative side takes over, that's when you find those like, good creative ideas and stuff start, taking off.
Yeah. And there's something about the night, because especially being awake at night, because you sort of understand that this is kind of it's a zone with no expectations in a way. Like it's because if you're working during the day, it's like you're kind of supposed to be doing that. But in the night, I mean, you can take this as abstract and philosophical as you want, but there's something about recognizing that this time is sort of unusual and undefined, and everything, like you look outside and there's nothing anywhere and everything is dark. So it's kind of like unknown territory in a way as well. And there's something that it kind of frees you up away from expectations and assumptions of what can live in this space.
That's so true. I haven't thought about it like that. I'm sure that could be the topic for an entire podcast.
Yeah.
So much in there.
Yeah. But for sure. Yeah. I would. That's the kind of best kind of stuff that love talking about.
Oh,
but yeah, cool. Second question on this last batch. If you could send a message to everyone's smartphone lock screen, and this goes out to everybody on the planet who has a smartphone, and they have to look at it in order to open their phone, to unlock the phone. If you could send something on that lock screen, what would you send?
Yeah, I went through a lot of different ways of approaching this. Like part of me wanted to say, read the manual, you know, but then I realized that I don't really read the manual, you know. I just, I'm like, I just experiment, you know, and kind of be curious about things and ask questions. And so I think if I could put anything on people's, you know, lock screen, it would be more along those lines, where it's like, you know, be curious about things and ask questions, because I think that mindset can be applied in so many different ways in your life, you know, whether that's, you know, with your art and creativity, or in your life, or in spirituality. I mean, I think that's just a good mindset to have overall.
Yeah, agreed. It's people don't dare to ask the questions, because questions usually lead, you know, to more questions and
Right.
and more problems, and people don't necessarily want to invite more of those in their life, but they probably should. All right. Who is a guest you would like to see on this podcast?
Well, you mentioned, have you had Jasper Blunk on already?
I have asked him,
Okay.
but he said he's basically too busy right now.
Okay.
So maybe if I manage to grow this podcast a bit, maybe I will manage to shift the balance, and, you know, but yeah, I understand he's very optimized, and, you know, with his time and working hard. So
Okay, well, he
yeah,
came up a couple times, so I was like, well, that's the obvious answer.
Yeah.
I think, and I gotta look up his name. Sorry.
No worries. Take your time.
I think it's Ben Osterhaus. Yeah, Osterhaus Sounds. He would be really cool to have on. I don't know if you've tried out his libraries, but they're really new and creative. It'd be cool to hear him talk about his approach.
Yeah, I know the company. I don't remember if I sent him an email about maybe checking out some of his stuff. I probably didn't. I'm not sure. I would have to check. But I know the company. I know some of his work. So yeah, I'll see if he's interested.
He'd be a good one. I was also thinking, you know, especially after seeing the last two questions, I was like, man, you know, Trolls Fullman from 8DO. I'm sure he'd have like a really interesting response to those. He'd be cool if you're able to get a hold of him.
Yeah, he's
another type that's like, you know, super creative, and honestly, I don't know. I was telling him I don't know how he does it. Like when he puts together those his demo videos showing off the final product, I'm like, I don't know how you do it, because usually by that time I've heard it so many times. I'm like sick of the way it sounds. How do you just create that energy and excitement, you know? And yeah.
Drugs.
I don't know. I hope not.
I don't know. I'm just joking. But
I think it's just the, you know, personality. I don't know. But it's inspirational. Like, you know, if I could. Unfortunately, so I think some people might interpret that as being like hype, you know, kind of hyping something up or a fakeness. But I didn't get that impression. I think it's just a personality trait of just being so excited to like hear the way, you know, things sound and the way that you interact with those sounds, you know. So he'd be cool too. I think in terms of like composers, I mentioned Alexander Brandon, and I think he has a YouTube channel these days, pretty rudimentary. but he'd be cool to have on just because he's got a lot of the history with like early video game music and stuff. And, that bridges into sampling because he would have to sample all his sounds to put in that tracker format.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll reach out for sure, see what happens. Is there like a creativity-related question or sort of topic that has been on your mind lately? Something that has been sort of maybe bothering you or something you're trying to work out? Is there anything of that sort that comes to mind? And obviously, this, if it's secret relating to some of your work, we don't have to go into it. But a question that you would like an answer to, relating to creativity.
There's probably all sorts of difficult questions to put out there. But I'll go for an easier one. I think one thing that I was struck by, listening to your music, especially I think it's your latest one. It might even be from the game that has all the synthesized elements. Is very cinematic. And the thing struck me going from track to track is just like how everything has this consistency to it and all the sounds mesh so well together. I was like, I'm not sure how you, what makes you decide on choosing certain sounds? Do you come up with a palette of sounds first, or do you just spend hours going through all the factory presets until you find something that resonates?
Well, the answer is probably a mix of both. I always have the idea. I don't struggle to visualize what I'm after very quickly. Like as soon as I saw the video game, I saw a clip of it and I was like, ooh, I would love to, write music for that. And I knew immediately what it sounded like in my head. And luckily I got the job. But I just had this idea that it definitely is synthy and kind of blippy bloppy light in a sense, but it has this kind of cinematic blanket on it. And it does have some strings, some textural strings underneath, and then this kind of orchestral type of percussion there. And I always knew that that was going to be the blend of it, because it's kind of when you look at the spaceships, they are kind of toy-like in a way, but everything else about the game is kind of going for this a semi-realistic style in terms of the kind of the ideas of the gameplay and the technology they use. So I immediately had that kind of vision in my head. And then it was just a matter of finding the right tool for it. So you said, I always go for a palette of things before I go do anything. And I happened to, come across this lineup from Heaviosity called Mosaic series. And it's basically different synths done in this sort of different styles, different philosophies, but they all have the same kind of coloring in a way. Obviously, they're done by the same people, so they're going to have a similar tone. And I thought that was a perfect marriage of both, because Heaviosity has that kind of cinematic sound to them, but they were sampling these kind of very traditional synths, and they would kind of produce some traditional recognizable sounds, but they would have that cinematic tint. So I went with that. And also a lot of the project uses a lot of the Heaviosity percussion as well. So I knew that palette was just going to work very well together. But, that being said, that's not always the case. I think Breachway is kind of a unique thing, that it uses a lot of Heaviosity stuff. And then the strings, I think I'm using some Spitfire, Oliver Arnold's strings in there. They're kind of these kind of very textural, swirling type of things. So I think that's mostly what I'm using there for strings. But yeah, some other albums, it's sometimes a kind of a mishmash thing. here and there. But I know my tools really, really well.
Yeah.
And I obviously cover a lot of sample library and virtual instrument stuff. So whenever I just see something I need to do, I immediately know, okay, I'm going to pick this one for this, because there's another thing that I'm working on now, and a lot of the slate and ash stuff works really well for that. So I want to kind of take that for that one, and then take some synths from somewhere else. So it just depends a lot. But yeah, I also love, I value presets a lot, because I think sound design, like designing these sounds, is a job in itself. And me as a composer, I'm not necessarily going to be the best sound designer for the job. Sometimes I might be, it depends on the tool, but most of the time I like to leverage and use the work of great sound designers. I mean, just like with your instruments as well, like Evolution Songwriter, it's just, they're just stupid good. So it's like I could never put together a tone that's necessarily as good. I will always do some tweaking, but in terms of getting the basic ballpark and then fine tuning the edges and the details, I fully embrace that, because I would rather be finding a sound that I love just like that and go and compose music, which is what I should be doing, instead of tweaking sounds endlessly, which I'm not as good as not as good at compared to composing music, for example. So that's kind of my general formula.
Yeah. Well, I think that that really comes across your familiarity with the sounds. I think that's probably also what I was noticing with the cohesion and the texture of the the way things sound, not just in that, but your orchestral stuff as well. So it's very cool.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to hear that you enjoy the music. That's the main thing. And I hope to do more composition in the future, but I need to make more money to make more time for that as well. So hopefully I can figure that out, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. Well, ideally those go together. Like, you're no less of an artist because money is important, because you also have to eat and pay bills and stuff. Like,
yeah, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm really happy that whatever I do relates to music, and I love music technology a lot. So it's really, a lot of the stuff I do on the review side is it kind of combines everything I like into one thing, with all the video production and the music tech and the composition. Because when I'm doing the reviews, it's essentially like tiny mini compositions that I'm doing on the fly. So
yeah,
cool. Yeah. Well, again, thanks for your time. This went along a bit longer than I probably. I could be here for hours, but I want to be somewhat respectful of your time. There's still a ton of things that we didn't get to, but I love when the conversations, just flow naturally. And but hopefully, saying all this, I hope that we could do maybe a round two, maybe a few years down the road, and cover some of the other stuff as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're going to put all the links in the description for your stuff and Orange Tree Sample, so people can go check them out there. Is there anywhere specific you want to direct people or invite them to go check out?
They can just go to the homepage, and that'll show the newest products and stuff like that.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's going to be in the in the description of this episode, wherever you may be watching. So again, thank you so much for taking the time, and hopefully we can do a round two in the not so distant future.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marcus. Yeah, it was good. You actually gave me a lot to think about, so I'm kind of feeling inspired with, some of the stuff that we talked about with, original vision and stuff. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and likewise, I mean that's the best part of doing this is to, get to meet people and come across new interesting ideas, and yeah, one of the best ways to spend time. So, thank you.